If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 21, The Saint Statue Restoration Plan. Inside the governor's office at the top of the spire. Governor, here is the report you requested. Yousef handed Eden a chart detailing the manpower and resources needed to restore the saint statue. He looked concerned. Sir, do we really need to rush the restoration of the saint statue like this? It's putting a great strain on the court district. Eden's tone was firm and unyielding. The court district needs the saint statue of the god emperor to stabilize people's hearts. From now on, our top priority is the restoration of the statue. The shortage of food supplies had gradually weakened the control over the court district. If this issue wasn't resolved, the army that maintained order would collapse, the court district would fall, and Eden would face his own demise. Thus, Eden needed a powerful backing, a spiritual symbol to support him. It was to make the people and the army believe in him and to nurture a power of hope. In simpler terms, Eden needed to paint an illusion of hope, and the people had to believe it. The miracle of the god emperor was the best, and only, choice. Of course, the miracle was fake, but the hope it could generate was very real. Once enough hope was gathered to open the portal to the space ark, the food crisis would be resolved. Eden carefully explained the surface-level goal of restoring the statue to Yousef. Naturally, he didn't mention a word about the secret of the little sundae. I understand your intentions. Yousef listened carefully and nodded in understanding. In his mind, although the task seemed troublesome, if done right, it could benefit the court district. With careful planning, things shouldn't get too out of hand. If worst comes to worst, they could suppress dissenters, which would help clear out some of the surplus population. The restoration of the statue is crucial, and I'll leave it to you to handle. Eden looked at Yousef. Prepare a detailed plan for me to review. Governor, I'll make sure you're satisfied. Yousef's attitude was resolute. Since the governor had made the decision, as the senior steward, he had no right to question it. His only duty was to execute the plan with determination. Yousef accepted the order and immediately went off to make preparations. After Yousef left, Eden continued scribbling and drafting. The restoration of the statue and the display of the miracle were just the beginning. A series of follow-up actions were needed to ensure the best effect. Before long, the office door was knocked again. Yousef returned to report on his progress. As expected of a senior steward, his efficiency was impeccable. In just 2 hours, he had come up with a comprehensive plan. According to Yousef's plan, since the miracle was to be showcased, the restoration of the statue had to be conducted in secret to maintain an air of mystery. He proposed relocating the residents closest to the sacred square and tightening patrols around the area, prohibiting anyone unrelated from approaching. To cover all bases, he also assigned a team to ensure confidentiality. The restoration deadline was set for the night before the Emperor's Ascension Festival, ensuring the saint statue would be fully restored by the time of the festival. There were 2 weeks until the deadline. During this time, Yousef would mobilize all available personnel from the court district. Using engineering machinery, they would work around the clock to ensure the restoration was completed smoothly. In short, everything was ready, and they could begin as soon as Eden gave the green light. I'm pleased with your plan, but isn't it too simple just to restore it? What do you mean, sir? If we're going to do it, let's do it properly. Use more precious materials. How else will we demonstrate our loyalty? Eden decided to use the gold and jewels from the court district's treasury to embellish the statue, turning it into a golden saint statue. The aim was to shock and awe the masses. After all, those items were of no immediate use anyway. What a brilliant idea! Yousef flattered seamlessly. I'll instruct the craftsmen to come up with the best designs. With everything mostly settled, Eden still felt a bit uneasy and added a few more points. I have 2 additional requests. First, make sure to provide compensation for those being relocated. Second, during the construction, be as gentle as possible to avoid casualties. Given Yousef's track record, it was better to remind him. After all, a project resulting in numerous deaths would be too cruel. For Eden, the people were the most precious resource for generating hope. They needed to be treated well to nurture that power of hope. I understand, Yousef replied solemnly, I will carry out your orders to the letter, and everything will go exactly as you wish. After making his promise, he saluted Eden and quickly left. Having a capable subordinate made everything easier. There was no need for Eden to worry about the details. Eden leaned back in his soft chair and stretched contentedly. He had a few more ideas for the plan in mind and pressed the button on his desk. One by one, the officials of the court district entered the office, took the documents, and set about implementing the plans. This was the power of authority. Whatever Eden thought of, no matter how far-fetched, the entire court district and its people would do everything in their power to make it a reality. Time passed, and the restoration plan for the saint statue had reached its halfway point. Everything was proceeding quietly, and the public remained unaware, only noticing the increased strictness of the night curfew. Only Eden knew that this was a high-stakes gamble, and the court district had paid a steep price for it. The restoration was going smoothly, though a small hiccup occurred along the way. According to the craftsman's calculations, the court district's gold reserves weren't enough to cover the entire statue, which would reduce its impact. Eden couldn't accept that the spectacle had to be flawless. With no other option, he decided to raid his own Spire residence. He ordered all the gold decorations from his home to be stripped, including golden furniture and even the dinner plates. Jewels were no exception. In short, not a single piece of gold or jewel was spared. Anyway, Eden wasn't too fond of the extravagant style, it was too flashy. After this ordeal, they finally gathered enough gold. The gold would undergo special treatment and be applied to the saint statue on the night before the Emperor's Ascension Festival. The jewels would also be embedded into the statue at that time. After stripping all the gold and jewels, Eden's Spire residence took on a much simpler appearance. It even had a bit of a bare-bones look. Linda, the head maid, had been feeling upset these past few days, quietly shedding tears. She worried that something had happened to the governor and feared she might be abandoned. If anything happened to the governor, what would become of the maids? Eden noticed Linda's strange behavior. "What's wrong? You're not happy?" Linda, having held back her emotions for days, broke down and threw herself into Eden's arms, trembling. Tears streamed down her face as she pleaded, "Please don't send me away, sir." Linda had grown up in the court district, raised and trained by the Grant family. Her sole purpose in life was to serve Eden. She had barely seen the outside world, but she knew it was a terrifying place. A few years ago, she even heard the sounds of artillery outside, and the house nearly collapsed. It was terrifying. Thankfully, that time had passed. Many people had disappeared, but she was still able to serve the governor. Now, the governor had become even more charming, treating her more gently. She often found herself fantasizing about being held tightly in his arms, longing to rest beside him. But those fantasies were soon shattered. Many people had come into the house, dismantling things and taking them away, even the governor's dinnerware. She had loved that dinnerware, polishing it carefully every day to give the governor the perfect dining experience. But now, it was all gone. Linda worried that she, too, would soon be taken away, just like the beautiful dinnerware. Eden listened patiently to Linda's concerns, gently stroking her back. "So that's what you're worried about? You've misunderstood." He didn't tell Linda the truth, simply comforting her. The reason for dismantling the gold and jewels was that he had grown tired of the decor and wanted to change the style. "Do your job well, and I won't send you away," Eden said firmly. "I never will." Linda looked up at Eden, her eyes misty and shimmering. Governor. Chapter 22, Rejection. Linda's eyes, glistening with tears, became even more enchanting, and she was completely lost in her emotions. She was willing to do anything if the governor gave the nod. Eden looked at Linda's expression, swallowing hard, struggling to contain himself. In broad daylight, she was truly a temptation. Linda gazed at him with deep concern. "Are you feeling unwell, my lord? Let me accompany you to your room." Eden frowned, knowing full well what she meant. If he truly went to the room with her, things would quickly spiral out of control. He glanced at her again. This situation was indeed difficult to control. Seeing no immediate response from Eden, Linda hesitated for a moment. Blushing, she bit her lip and said, "If you don't want to go to the room, then here would be fine too." "What?" Eden glanced toward a group of maids standing not far away, carefully peeking in their direction, faces flushed. Doing something like this out in the open? Eden felt the impulse rising but knew he couldn't act on it. If he gave in now, what if it led him straight to the Palace of Sin? He had to control his desires, at least until his little son Power had recovered enough to provide protection. Seeing his hesitation, Linda began to make a move. This was too much. Eden quickly stopped her, reassuring, "Next time, I promise." "Really, my lord? You promise? Linda asked, still kneeling, her face full of anticipation. What a strange angle. Eden couldn't hold back any longer and made a brief move before getting up, satisfied. I have business to attend to, we'll go deeper into this later. Indeed, he did have business. Leaving the Spire residence, Eden, escorted by Carter's guards, arrived at the state church. He had something important to discuss with Bishop Donny. A few days ago, when Bishop Donny learned that Eden was using gold and jewels to adorn the saint statue of the God Emperor, he was very pleased, and his attitude toward Eden had improved significantly. This time, Donny had even come to the church entrance to greet him personally. Bishop, you're being too courteous, Eden said as he got out of the car. I'm just making a small, insignificant contribution to the God Emperor. The great God Emperor never forgets anyone's contributions. Bishop Donny replied with a broad smile. Governor, allow me to lead you in prayer. He turned and led the way inside. Eden followed, though prayer wasn't the reason he had come. But since he was here, he might as well pray. He followed Bishop Donny to the shrine, where, under Donny's guidance, he began the prayers. Cherubim circled above, chanting hymns, and one even showered him with holy water as though it were free. The entire church seemed to be serving Eden alone. Clearly, they had little business these days. Which made sense, as this church was originally built for the nobles and officials of the upper hive. But during the heretic uprising, most of the upper hive's nobility and officials had been slaughtered. Those lucky enough to survive were later purged by Bayoff. Now, those remaining probably had little interest in prayer. While many of the citizens in the territory were devout believers, they were either in the mines or factories at this time. Getting enough sleep was already a luxury. Who had time to visit the church? Even those willing to use their precious rest time to seek the God Emperor's blessing didn't have the strength to make the long journey to the church due to prolonged hunger. And even if they did, the sacred square was under strict lockdown. They would be stopped by the law enforcement, turned away. If they were stubborn and tried to force their way in, a beating was the least they could expect. The unlucky ones might even face immediate execution. But that was only temporary. In the future, things would change. Every citizen of Earth would have the obligation to come and seek the God Emperor's protection. After the prayer ended, Eden approached Bishop Donny and handed him a data slate containing documents about the upcoming ceremony. The Emperor's Ascension Festival had been cancelled for many years, ever since the heavy taxes placed on Earth and the warp rift opened. Now, Eden was planning to restart the festival, organizing a grand ceremony on the day of the celebration. Eden promised that, in the future, he would help the church regain its former glory. In return, he hoped Bishop Donny would cooperate with him during the ceremony. Based on his recent interactions, Eden felt the old bishop was unlikely to refuse. Bishop Donny carefully reviewed the text and images on the data slate. Essentially, it was an imperial version of a presentation, detailing the ceremony's process, the attire of participants, and prepared speeches. Of course, the most important part concerned Bishop Donny himself. He would need to collaborate with Eden during the event. On the day of the Emperor's Ascension Festival, the fully restored saint statue would reveal a great miracle. Accompanied by the grand ceremony, Bishop Donny, guided by divine inspiration, would announce Eden as the savior of the people. Then, in the most perfect manner, the benevolent imperial governor Eden Grant would appear before his subjects. He would make a promise to deliver the people from their suffering. That was the entire plan. The plan would use up most of the court district's remaining resources. This was a high-stakes gamble. As Bishop Donny continued reading, his expression grew more serious. Eden's heart began to race. If there are any issues, feel free to raise them. We can adjust and cooperate as needed. All I see here is deception. Bishop Donny gripped the data slate tightly, struggling to contain his anger. You are deceiving the faithful, using the God Emperor's name to achieve political gain. What blasphemy this is! This is only temporary, I won't agree. Bishop Donny interrupted Eden's explanation. Leave, Governor. The church will not tolerate such sacrilege. He shoved the data slate back into Eden's hands and turned away, leaning on his staff as he walked off. Following their master's lead, the seraphim also distanced themselves from Eden, flying far away. At least listen to my explanation, Eden sighed. What's wrong with a well-meaning lie? I'm doing this for the people of the territory. Lies invite heresy, and the God Emperor does not accept deception of any kind. Bishop Donny's stern voice echoed, leaving no room for negotiation. Eden watched the old bishop walk away, letting out a deep sigh. It seemed he couldn't win the church's support. But the plan was already in motion. He had already sent out word that the benevolent Eden Grant had received the blessing of the God Emperor and would save the people from their hardships. When paired with the miracle of the saint statue's overnight restoration, the morale boost would be immense. But now, without the church's support, he might even face opposition. That would be a serious problem. If, during the ceremony, the church publicly opposed him, the situation would spiral out of control. Eden watched Bishop Donnie's retreating figure, feeling helpless. He couldn't bring himself to take drastic measures against the old man. Back when the upper hive forces were resisting the heretic army, it was Bishop Donnie who led the charge, swinging his mighty power axe and cutting his way through enemy lines. He even beheaded the heretic high priest who had defiled the God Emperor, dealing a massive blow to the heretic's morale, which had allowed the court district to turn the tide of battle. For this loyal, devout, and perhaps overly zealous servant of the God Emperor, Eden had no desire to harm him. With a heavy heart, Eden turned and left the church. The court district had already expended so much manpower and resources the Emperor's Ascension Festival had to proceed. There was no turning back now. Eden got into his hovercar and set off for the Spire residence. Having failed to convince Donnie face to face, he would have to activate Plan B. If I can't convince you, then I'll let the God Emperor do it. End of chapter. Check out my Patreon for plus 20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com/Zalum. Plus 500 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. Chapter 23, The Emperor's Holy Oracle. In the past few days, Eden had intermittently absorbed nearly 10,000 points of hope energy. Although there was still a significant gap from the 200,000 points needed, with the gradual recovery of his little son's energy, he had now gained the ability to influence the real world. One of these abilities was the creation of illusions, allowing him to project images into the dreams of others. This was undoubtedly a powerful ability. On a higher level, it was a privilege belonging to the gods. Great deities could bestow divine revelations upon their believers. Late at night, Eden stood on the balcony of his bedroom at the top of the spire, gazing down at his territory. In the sacred square below, workers were methodically carrying out the construction work. According to the plan, in addition to restoring the God Emperor's saint statue, a monument would also be erected at the foot of the statue. Only those loyal followers of the God Emperor, those who had made exceptional contributions to the planet Earth, would have the honor of having their names engraved upon it. The time had come. Eden closed his eyes, mentally connecting with the psychic core hidden within the head of the God Emperor's saint statue. As his consciousness merged with the psychic core, his psychic sense expanded enormously, nearly covering the entire territory. What a powerful ability at this moment, he felt as though he had become a lofty god. He even made the psychic core imitate the fluctuations of the God Emperor's psychic will. This would make it easier to deceive people and avoid being branded as a heretic. But the energy consumption was enormous. Eden could feel the hope energy he had accumulated being rapidly depleted. He could only maintain the connection for 10 seconds at most. Fortunately, he had prepared in advance, quickly directing his psychic consciousness toward the state church. He found Bishop Donnie, who was deep in sleep, and activated his illusion-creating ability, projecting some images into his mind. At the moment the projection was completed, the hope energy was exhausted. Eden's consciousness forcefully detached from the psychic core and returned to his body. That was close. Creating an illusion consumed far more hope energy than expected. He had nearly failed. In just a few seconds, he was completely drained, feeling as if he was walking on air. But at least he had accomplished his goal, successfully embedding the carefully designed images into Bishop Donnie's mind. Now, it was time to see how effective it would be. If it didn't work, he would have no choice but to restrain Bishop Donnie by force. Ugh, he felt even weaker. Eden braced himself and returned to his bedroom, collapsing onto the oversized bed, large enough to fit 10 people, and fell into a deep sleep. In Bishop Donnie's bedroom at the state church. The room was stark, almost devoid of decoration. Strangely, the alloy floor and walls bore deep gashes, as if they had been violently hacked apart. Inside the room was only an iron bed, with a menacing power axe leaning against the headboard. Bishop Donnie lay on the iron bed, already asleep. His expression was one of terror, as though he were experiencing something horrifying. Once again, he was having a nightmare. Since that terrifying, all-encompassing warp storm, Bishop Donnie had been plagued by nightmares. In his dreams, chaos and darkness consumed everything. Blood rained from the skies, and the faithful wailed in despair, while heretics and demons reveled in bloody, cruel rituals. The God Emperor's saint statue had collapsed, trampled upon and desecrated, blood tears flowing from its eyes. And there, Doni Mal, the loyal servant of the God Emperor, was powerless. The darkness swallowed Urth, growing thicker and deeper until it completely obscured the Emperor's light. Countless times, he dreamed of the destruction of Urth, of half the Empire suffering under tribulation. The endless, hopeless wails tore at his soul, leaving him in torment. In this current nightmare, Bishop Doni knelt before the toppled, corpse-strewn saint statue of the God Emperor, shouting in desperation. Almighty God Emperor, my faith in you has never wavered. Tears mixed with the blood rain as they slid down Bishop Doni's face. I beg you to cast your gaze upon us, for the lost lambs need your guidance. But no matter how much he cried out, nothing happened. The massive, broken head of the saint statue was slowly being submerged by blood. His despair reached its peak, he could bear no more. Just as he was about to be consumed by the darkness, a ray of light pierced through, illuminating the shadows. It was so warm, so resolute. Wherever the light touched, the darkness retreated. Bishop Doni felt the familiar presence emanating from the light. It was the God Emperor's radiance. Praise the God Emperor! He could once again feel his presence, the God Emperor had not abandoned his flock. Bishop Doni lifted his head, gazing devoutly toward the glowing light. Within it, he vaguely saw the great God Emperor. He wore golden armor, majestic and towering. In the vision, the God Emperor pointed his sword forward, and a young ruler, following his will, led an army to break through the darkness. He judged the heretics and drove away the shadow. The scene shifted, and another image appeared. The God Emperor, seated on his throne, looked down upon all life. Below the throne, a grand ceremony was being held, with the young ruler kneeling before the God Emperor, offering his loyalty amid the crowd's adoration. At this moment, Bishop Doni could clearly see the young ruler's face. It was none other than Eden Grant, the governor of Urth. Eden Grant, bathed in the God Emperor's light, was so devout, so benevolent. He seemed like a natural-born ruler, one that inspired worship. Bishop Doni also saw himself in the vision. He stood beside Eden Grant, overseeing the ceremony, guiding him like a mentor. This was the God Emperor's holy oracle. The concept of the holy oracle had long existed in legend. It was said that only the most devout believers and warriors could receive such a message. For example, the Emperor's champions. Guided by holy visions, they would don the black armor of the Emperor's champion, pledging their loyalty through endless battle. Some were not only given holy visions but also received the God Emperor's blessings. Bishop Doni could feel it. The darkness in his heart was dissipating, and his body was filling with strength. He had received the God Emperor's blessing. Instantly, Bishop Doni became fervent, loudly praying. All praise to the God Emperor. The young ruler, Eden Grant, grew clearer in his vision, the God Emperor's radiance becoming ever brighter, until it filled his entire sight. The light became blinding. The intense brightness woke Bishop Doni, and he realized it was already morning. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, warm and gentle. It had been so long since he had slept this well. He wiped the tear marks from his face, certain that he had finally escaped the torment of nightmares. The dream from last night was vivid in his memory, etched clearly into his mind. Especially the face of Eden Grant, impossible to forget. Eden had gone to great lengths, using an enhanced version of his appearance to ensure a lasting impact, making it the perfect template for his divine dream. The God Emperor has shown the lost lambs the way. Bishop Doni muttered. After sitting in quiet reflection for a while, he seemed to have made a decision. Rising, he grasped his staff and walked out. Though slightly hunched, Bishop Doni's steps were firm and resolute. The great God Emperor had delivered his holy oracle, selecting the one who would lead Urth out of the darkness. As the Church's priest and a devout servant of the God Emperor, it was time for him to offer his loyalty in his own way. The time had come to restore the Church's glory. Chapter 24, Meeting Again. Inside the bedroom of the Spire residence, Eden was sound asleep, wrapped in warm blankets. "My lord, it's time to wake up." In a daze, he heard a gentle voice whispering in his ear. A sweet fragrance accompanied the voice, tickling his ear. What was this annoying disturbance? Couldn't he just sleep? Irritated, Eden reached out to push the person away, only to grab something soft, and without thinking, he gave it a squeeze. Ah! Linda let out a soft yelp, backing away in surprise from the sudden touch. Linda! Why are you waking me up so early? Realizing what had just happened, Eden quickly withdrew his hand. My lord, it's already noon. Seeing that the governor was awake, Linda skillfully signaled the maids to enter, assisting him with washing up and dressing. She gently wiped Eden's face and added, Bishop Donny has been waiting to see you for quite some time. Bishop Donny came to see me? Eden was overjoyed. Seems like the divine dream from last night worked. Using the Emperor's card was extremely effective, as everyone in the Empire revered and was loyal to the God Emperor. It seemed he would have to make good use of this illusion-creating ability in the future. But he had to keep it secret. Fully dressed, Eden didn't even bother with breakfast and hurried to the reception hall to meet Bishop Donny. He needed to know the results quickly to move forward with the next stage of the ceremony preparations. In the reception hall, Bishop Donny sat with his eyes closed in deep thought, but the way he tightly gripped his staff betrayed his emotions. Last night, the God Emperor had bestowed a holy oracle. He had spent the entire morning reflecting on the images in the oracle. Donny believed he had fully understood the God Emperor's will. The God Emperor had chosen a young ruler, Eden Grant, as the savior. Eden would lead the people of Earth through the darkness and back to the Empire, returning to the embrace of the God Emperor. As for Donny Mal, he would serve as the mentor, guiding the young ruler along the right path. There was no doubt about it. Thinking of this, Bishop Donny felt an enormous weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He could not betray the trust of the God Emperor. He had to give his all, sacrificing everything for this mission. Praise the God Emperor! Bishop Donny whispered in reverence. The God Emperor valued even his aging, brittle bones, and he now felt renewed with vigor. Your Excellency, sorry to keep you waiting. Eden hurried over, wearing a warm smile. What brings you to see me? Last night, Eden had implanted an illusion into Bishop Donny's consciousness, which was the limit of what he could do. Whether the bishop believed it or how he interpreted it was out of Eden's control. Bishop Donny scrutinized Eden carefully. Previously, he had thought of this imperial governor as mediocre, someone indulged in wine and pleasures, decayed and worthless. But now, the more he looked, the more he saw a regal aura in Eden. No wonder the God Emperor had chosen him. I must have misjudged him. Bishop Donny smiled. Governor, did you have any strange dreams last night? Dreams? I didn't dream at all last night, Eden replied with an innocent look. Bishop Donny nodded, his suspicions confirmed. That was how it should be. He thought to himself, only the most devout believers receive holy oracles. Before, Eden Grant hadn't even cared to repair the God Emperor's statue. How could he possibly be worthy of receiving a holy oracle? Yet the great God Emperor had still chosen him. No, the God Emperor had chosen me, his most loyal servant. Donny needed to guide this young ruler on the right path, to save the people of Earth from the darkness. With a solemn expression, Bishop Donny looked Eden in the eye. I have decided to accept your earlier request. Under the guidance of the God Emperor's will, I will fully support your actions. Eden let out a sigh of relief. It seemed the illusion had worked. However, the bishop paused and added, but you must make a promise. What kind of promise? Eden's heart raced again. Bishop Donny, as if speaking of a holy duty, declared, fulfill your responsibility and, under the guidance of the great God Emperor, save the people of Earth. This was exactly what Eden wanted to hear. I promise to reclaim Earth from the heretics and chaos. Eden looked at Bishop Donny earnestly. I hope the Church will stand with the court district as we strive for Earth's bright future. Bishop Donny nodded in satisfaction. Of course. Especially with you, the God Emperor's most loyal servant. Eden enthusiastically shook Bishop Donny's hand. Without your guidance, we would struggle to accomplish such a monumental task. This old man, the only surviving bishop on Earth, was not only of high status but also possessed formidable combat abilities. Bringing him into the fold was definitely the right move. Eden's words hit the mark. Bishop Donny couldn't suppress his smile, his face lighting up. Governor, do not worry. I will support you, and the Church will provide you with all the help you need. Praise the God Emperor. That's excellent news, we really need assistance. Anything at all, right? Eden's grin widened. Of course. Bishop Donny instinctively nodded, then quickly realized what he had agreed to and tried to shake his head in refusal. But seeing Eden's eager, expectant face, he gulped and reluctantly nodded. Yes, for the God Emperor, everything. After an hour of friendly negotiation, Eden enthusiastically and somewhat reluctantly escorted Bishop Donny out of the Spire residence. Bishop Donny felt his head throbbing. Just now, he had agreed to give away the church's treasury. The treasury contained various relics that had been blessed by the church over millennia, including weapons, armor, and more. The thought made his legs feel weak. Taking a deep breath, Bishop Donny comforted himself. It was all for the Holy Oracle. Everything was part of the God Emperor's plan. Eden stood at the doorway, watching Bishop Donny's departing figure with a wide grin. The old man's steps seemed unsteady. Was his health failing? That wouldn't do. Without a healthy body, how could he serve him properly? Ahem, I mean, how could he serve the God Emperor faithfully? Eden turned to Beof, who was standing at attention beside him. Send the bishop some restoration potions later, the best ones. The original Eden had been weak from years of indulgence and had a good understanding of how to recover health. He even had plenty of potions stored up. Remembering something, Eden added, "Oh, and take a transport team with you. See what the ceremony needs and bring everything back. Don't hold back, it's all for the God Emperor. The bishop won't mind." "Yes, my lord." Bishop Donny, with his keen hearing, overheard this and stumbled slightly, muttering under his breath, "For the God Emperor." Beof looked as though he would carry out the task without hesitation, but Eden still felt uneasy. He glanced around as if he were about to commit a crime, then quietly whispered, "Anything valuable, bring it all back." "Got it." Beof whispered back, "Understood, my lord. I'll call for more transport vehicles." Hearing this, Eden nodded in satisfaction and strolled back inside. The preparations for the ceremony were proceeding smoothly. Now he had another important task to handle: pacifying the army. The armed forces of the court district were divided into three main branches: the Guard, the Law Enforcement, and the Defense Forces. The Guard was responsible for protecting the governor. The Law Enforcement maintained internal order. The Defense Forces were the primary combat unit, mostly composed of refugees from the lower hive. They were in charge of external operations, such as purging cultist hideouts and large mutant nests. There wasn't much to worry about with the Guard or Law Enforcement. But the Defense Forces, who had the largest numbers and heaviest responsibilities, were increasingly strained, and the lack of resources had fueled much discontent. If this issue wasn't resolved quickly, any unrest that erupted during the ceremony would be a disaster. In the upper hive, pipe defense zone. Massive metal pipes crisscrossed in a complex web, connecting to the planet's core. The pipes were so wide that some were large enough to fit transport aircraft. Within one of these pipes, sharp, guttural noises echoed, resembling the growls of beasts. Mutants, deformed and covered in fleshy growths, roared as they surged out from their nests. Chapter 25, The One-Eyed Eri and Cunning Case. Boom! 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 The shells from the Minotaur self-propelled artillery whistled through the air, crashing into the oncoming tide of mutants. Explosions created pockets of vacuum in the mutant horde, but those gaps were quickly filled by the seemingly endless wave of creatures, screeching as they rushed toward the defensive line of the Guard. "Open fire!" Eri Rogue, the company commander, glared with his single mechanical red eye as he was the first to pull the trigger. The other soldiers on the line quickly followed suit. Automatic rifles and heavy machine guns spewed fire, their crisscrossing streams of bullets tearing through the oncoming mutants, turning flesh and bone into flying debris. Under the suppressive fire, the mutant tide halted momentarily, like a wave smashing into a dam. But this reprieve didn't last long. Mutants from the rear stepped over the corpses of their fallen and resumed their relentless assault. Soon, scattered mutants began breaking through the gunfire, charging at the defensive line. "Heavy infantry, stop them!" Rows of heavily armored soldiers emerged, clad in shell-like armor. Wielding power axes and chain swords, they intercepted the mutants that breached the defense. One by one, the mutants collided with the heavy infantry, only to be cut down, their blood spraying everywhere. Despite the dense defense, some mutants still managed to slip through, attacking the unprotected, ordinary soldiers. Arg! One soldier was knocked down by a mutant, his belly torn open. He screamed in agony before a hail of bullets hit him and the mutant together, killing them both. It was an unspoken agreement among the soldiers to end the suffering quickly. No one retreated. Because just 5 kilometers behind the front line was a residential area, their families were there. "Die, you bastards!" Eri swung his chain sword, slicing an attacking mutant in half. Blood splattered across his face, making his glowing red mechanical eye appear even more sinister. He roared, "Hold the line! Just 15 more minutes, and we'll wipe out these damn creatures." This was the second mutant horde this month, and the guard had become experienced at dealing with them. As the battle dragged on, however, fatigue set in. More and more soldiers were overrun by the mutants, torn apart with no chance to resist. Screams of pain echoed throughout the defensive line. Damn logistics! We can't even fill our stomachs. Where are we supposed to get the strength to fight? The guard's supplies were managed by the court district's logistics department. But the bureaucrats didn't care about the soldiers' lives. As the pressure on the guard grew, their rations had been severely reduced. Their meals were barely better than those of the workers. How could they maintain their combat strength like that? Kill! Take down these disgusting monsters! Eri shouted as he charged forward, but in a moment of distraction, he was knocked down by a mutant. He pulled out his pistol, blasting the mutant's head to pieces, but more were already closing in. There was no time to react. Bang! 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 The sweet sound of a bolt pistol rang out. Bullets struck the oncoming mutants with precision, sending them to meet the dark gods of chaos. "Still alive, Cyclops?" A calm voice came from behind. It was Kay's Light, the cunning junior officer, reloading his bolt pistol as he spoke. "Still kicking. My father always said I'd outlive everyone else." Eri spat out some blood and got to his feet. "And so they all died, and here I am, still alive." He glared at Kays, demanding, "Where were you hiding just now?" Kays had a reputation for being cunning and cautious within the company. Whenever the fighting started, he seemed to vanish. Yet strangely, he always reappeared at crucial moments, racking up impressive achievements. "Where else?" "I've been behind you, observing the battlefield." Eri was known as a battle-hardened veteran, and staying behind him was relatively safe. "Cunning little brat." Eri sneered at Kay's methods. "A real man faces fear head-on. I'm just using my brain, unlike you an animal." Kays said this as he raised his gun, pointing it behind him, the barrel landing directly in the mouth of a mutant trying to sneak up on him. Squeal! Boom! The mutant's head exploded before it even knew what hit it. "I clawed my way out of the underhive. What do you expect?" Eri growled, grabbing a mutant by the neck and slamming it to the ground before crushing its head underfoot. He panted slightly and looked at Kays. "Do you notice anything strange?" "Yeah, don't you think this mutant tide is much weaker than before?" "Now that you mention it, they're not as fierce as last time," Eri muttered as he hacked down another mutant. "These things aren't putting up the same fight. They're running." Kays frowned as he pieced it together. "No, they're fleeing." "Fleeing? From what?" "It means something far worse is chasing them, and it's almost here." Realizing this, Kays made a quick decision. "Find the communications officer. We need to report this to the commander and get everyone on high alert." Boom! Just as he was about to act, a massive explosion shook the distant front line, sending dust and smoke billowing into the air. That was the first pipeline line of defense. The explosion came from behind the line, meaning something had completely broken through their defenses, and the blast's location was right at the command center where their commander was stationed. This was bad. "Damn it, what do we do now, kid?" Even Eri was momentarily stunned. "Let's focus on our own line first." Kay's face darkened. He listened carefully, then looked toward the dark, gaping mouth of the transport pipe. "Something big is coming our way." The rumbling sounds from within the transport pipe grew louder and more distinct, like a massive creature charging through, causing the very ground to shake with each thundering step. Eri swallowed hard. "That's one big monster. Judging by the footsteps, it must weigh at least 5 tons. Kays took a deep breath. "Prepare for defense." By now, no more mutants were emerging from the pipe, and the scattered ones remaining were quickly taken down by the soldiers. All eyes turned to the transport pipe, where the rumbling grew louder. Something far more terrifying was about to emerge. "Prepare for defense." Eri roared, "Aim all weapons at the pipe entrance. As soon as something comes out, blast it to pieces." Following the order, the self-propelled artillery was repositioned, all targeting the mouth of the transport pipe. The soldiers reformed their ranks, aiming their weapons at the dark entrance. Everyone held their breath, waiting for the creature to appear. Roar! A terrifying howl echoed from inside the transport pipe. The sound was piercing and horrifying, as if it could tear everything apart. The sheer pressure of it sent chills down the soldiers' spines, fear gripping their hearts. The monster had arrived. Chapter 26, The Giant Mutant. Bonus Chapter. Please leave a review. It means a lot. Thanks. When the giant mutant appeared, everyone gasped in shock. It was a towering humanoid creature, standing about 3 meters tall, with bulging muscles that looked as hard as stone. Each time it breathed, its muscles seemed to writhe like living things, tightening and relaxing in a way that exuded overwhelming pressure. It was the embodiment of raw violence, as if it wanted to tear everything apart. The giant mutant's blood-red eyes locked onto the soldiers at the front line, and a savage grin spread across its blood-stained lips. Pieces of another mutant's limb fell from its mouth, landing with a sickening splat on the ground. Thunk! A grenade landed on the creature's hard muscles, rolling down to its feet. The mutant glanced down just as the grenade exploded with a loud boom. Roaring with fury, the giant mutant brushed off the shrapnel from the explosion, bellowing at the soldiers. The tense atmosphere shattered, and the soldiers pulled their triggers, unleashing streams of fire toward the giant mutant. Attack! Kill that monster! Roared Eri, the one-eyed commander, as his heavy machine gun spewed bullets, rapidly depleting the ammo belt. Empty shell casings piled up on the ground like a small mountain. Beside him, Kaze spat out the pin of a grenade, aimed a rocket launcher over the barricade, and fired at the giant mutant. Boom! 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 Shells from the self-propelled artillery pounded the area around the giant mutant, lighting up the battlefield with explosions. The barrage covered a 5-meter radius around the mutant, sending up thick clouds of dust and smoke that obscured everyone's view. Eri's heavy machine gun clicked empty. He tossed it aside and raised a shotgun, keeping his eyes fixed on the thick smoke. "You think it's dead?" he asked Kaze, but received no reply. Turning, he found Kaze had already disappeared. "That sly bastard, where'd he sneak off to this time?" Cursing quietly, Eri turned his attention back to the smoke. Suddenly, a massive chunk of concrete flew out of the smoke, smashing into one of the self-propelled artillery units, destroying it in an instant. Boom! A massive shadow leaped into the air, landing in front of the defensive line with a thunderous crash. As the dust settled, the giant mutant emerged, its muscles twitching and pulsating with an intimidating presence. It glared down at the tiny humans before it, blood-stained teeth bared in a vicious grin. The air was thick with violent intent. It was going to kill them all. The mutant's shadow loomed over Eri, and for a moment, he froze under its malevolent gaze. His mechanical red eye gleamed even brighter under the intense emotions, almost glowing. Eri took a deep breath, gripping his shotgun tightly, and whispered to himself, "I am Eri the Undying, I fear nothing, I am undying." His courage surged, overwhelming the fear, and control of his body returned. "Die, you bastard!" With newfound determination, Eri raised his shotgun and fired a round directly into the giant mutant's eye. In retaliation, the mutant swatted Eri aside like a rag doll, sending him crashing into a nearby barricade. The force of the impact made Eri cough up blood as he hit the ground. When he looked up, the giant mutant was already coming toward him, its massive arm raised, ready to crush him into a bloody pulp. But just then, a shell whizzed by, slamming into the mutant's back and drawing its attention away. Roaring in fury, it charged toward the self-propelled artillery, smashing it with its huge fists. In mere moments, the artillery was nothing but rubble. Still, the giant mutant's rage hadn't been satisfied, and it turned its fury toward the remaining soldiers. The battlefield filled with screams as brave warriors were smashed, ripped apart, and devoured. Even the heavily armored infantry, clad in their shell-like armor, were no match for the mutant's brutal strength. They crumpled like paper under its attacks. The enemy was terrifying beyond words. Yet none of the soldiers ran. Instead, they fought back, roaring in defiance. Behind them was their home. No one would flee. Eri's men were known for being the bravest and most fearless, with one exception: Kaze. Eri struggled to his feet, watching as the young soldiers he had trained were torn apart, one by one, right before his eyes. An overwhelming fury surged in his chest, and his mechanical eye blazed bright red. He drew his chainsword and charged at the giant mutant with a roar. Fight! 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 Eri the Undying was always charging forward, bringing death to his enemies. Using the defensive barricade for leverage, Eri leaped onto the mutant's back, gripping its blood-soaked flesh with his mechanical arm and climbing toward its head. For the Emperor! He bellowed as he drove his chainsword deep into the mutant's skull, spraying blood and flesh everywhere. The searing pain made the mutant howl in agony, thrashing its head to shake Eri off. But Eri's mechanical arm dug into its flesh, holding on tightly. He gripped his chainsword and activated its full power, cutting deeper into the mutant's skull. Zzz. A massive hand reached up, grabbing Eri and yanking him off with brute force. Eri's mechanical arm was ripped apart, spilling black oil as he was torn from the mutant's back. Yet he still hadn't given up. He had one more grenade. This would be his final attack. But as Eri reached for the grenade with his remaining hand, he realized it was gone. The grenade had fallen off. With the mutant's crushing grip tightening around him, Eri could no longer resist. The sheer force of the mutant's grip was enough to slowly crush him. Was this the end for Eri the Undying? As his consciousness faded, Eri thought of nothing but his impending death. Just as he closed his eyes, ready to accept his fate. Bam! A loud crash echoed, and Eri felt himself lifted into the air, only to slam back down onto the ground. Cyclops! Cyclops! Was someone calling him? Am I still alive? Fighting off the dizziness, Eri opened his eyes. All he could see was red. Wiping the blood from his face, Eri finally made sense of the scene before him. It was that sly Case. Case had driven a heavy mining truck straight into the giant mutant, pinning it against the iron wall of the transport pipe. Because of that, Eri had been thrown free from the mutant's grasp. Sneaky bastard, always showing up at the right moment. Eri muttered with a grin, feeling his strength ebb away. All he wanted was to lie down and rest for a bit. Run, Cyclops, run! Case, looking flustered, jumped out of the mining truck and dashed toward Eri. If we don't get out of here, we'll be dead. Still dazed, Eri barely registered the urgency. Case cursed under his breath, then slapped him hard across the face. What the hell? Eri snapped awake, glaring with his one good eye. The truck's gonna blow. If you don't want to be blown to pieces, start running. Damn it, give me a hand. Case helped Eri to his feet, and together they sprinted forward, shouting warnings to the other soldiers. Get clear. Danger. They hadn't gotten far when the giant mutant, still trapped under the mining truck, began to thrash wildly. Fuel spilled across the ground. As the mutant lifted the truck, it noticed the cluster mines stacked inside the driver's cabin. Boom! The cluster mines detonated, and the fuel ignited, engulfing the giant mutant in flames. The shockwave from the explosion knocked Eri and Case to the ground as they scrambled away. Eri spat out a mouthful of dirt. Think it's dead now. Chapter 27, The Guard. Bonus chapter. Please leave a review. It means a lot. Thanks. Amidst the roaring flames, the giant mutant staggered out, still alive. The air grew tense, but it was clear the mutant was at the end of its strength. After only a few steps, it collapsed with a loud thud, finally dead. Eri and Case both sighed in relief, collapsing against the fortifications. The gunfire and explosions continued to echo throughout the pipeline district, indicating that the other squads were still locked in battle. Just as Eri was about to rally his troops for a much-needed rest, the heavy sound of footsteps echoed from the transport pipe ahead. Thud! 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 The entire transport pipe seemed to tremble. Whatever was coming was even more terrifying than the last mutant. A bigger one is coming. Case swallowed nervously. Eri struggled to his feet, staring toward the pipe entrance. From the darkness emerged an enormous figure, standing about 4 meters tall, with muscles rippling and contracting, radiating raw power. It stood there silently, its massive, bloodshot eyes fixed on the soldiers. The craving for violence and blood was palpable. The soldiers could feel the overwhelming malice radiating from the giant mutant and were filled with despair. They no longer had the strength to mount an effective defense. But Eri, despite his injuries, raised his remaining arm and pointed his pistol forward. Form ranks. That's suicide. Case, standing beside Eri, grumbled angrily. We can't fight this thing. Yes, it is. Eri grinned through gritted teeth. But we can't let this monster get to the residential district, can we? Dragging their wounded bodies, the soldiers reformed their ranks, preparing to face their final fate. Just as they were ready to meet their end, a small assault craft appeared, hovering above the giant mutant. Emblazoned with the golden lion of House Grant, the court district's reinforcements had arrived. Carter, the captain of the guard, led 2 guardsmen as they leapt from the craft, landing on the ground with a cloud of dust. The guard had undergone a complete re-equipping process, now clad in pristine, heavy power armor made of a mix of ceramic and steel. Each carried large bolt rifles. Standing at over 2 meters tall, they resembled a younger, smaller version of the Space Marines. These new weapons had been scavenged from the church's treasure trove by Eden, vastly enhancing the strength of the guard. Of course, they were still far from the true might of Space Marines. But for dealing with regular monsters, they were more than sufficient. Like the hulking beast before them, the giant mutant, enraged by the sight of the new arrivals, tensed its muscles and charged at Carter and his guardsmen. Without wasting any unnecessary movements, the guardsmen advanced steadily. They raised their bolt rifles, pulling the triggers and leaving gaping wounds on the mutant's enormous body. When the beast closed in for hand-to-hand combat, they set down their rifles and drew their large chainswords, continuing their march forward. The mutant charged at full speed, throwing a powerful punch at the guardsmen, hoping to smash them into paste. Clang! Carter raised his arm and blocked the blow, the impact cracking the ground beneath him. It was unimaginable, but he had stopped the monster's attack. Roar! The giant mutant swung again, aiming to crush the guardsman half its size. But it was all in vain. It roared in frustration. In the next moment, Carter's chainsword tore into the mutant's abdomen, sending a wave of pain through the beast. Before it could scream, it felt its legs go numb. The other 2 guardsmen had sliced through its massive thighs with their own chainswords, nearly severing its legs entirely. With a heavy thud, the giant mutant collapsed before Carter. It raised its head weakly, only to see Carter's cold expression and hear the terrifying noise of his chainsword slicing into its skull. Carter's blade plunged vertically into the mutant's head, nearly splitting it in half. The giant mutant fell silent, dead at last. Carter and his men pulled their chainswords from the corpse and raised their bolt rifles, unloading their magazines into the body until it was a bloody pulp. The fight ended with Carter throwing a firebomb to finish it off. Without a word, they turned and headed back to the assault craft, leaving behind only burning remains. Not a single word had been spoken throughout the entire battle. This was the guard, cold and efficient. The guard was a force of over 100 men, the most powerful in the court district, and the cornerstone of Eden's control. Carter gave Eri a brief nod before boarding the assault craft with his men. The ship then took off, heading toward another battlefield. They had orders to eliminate all large mutants. This mutant horde had produced more than a dozen giant mutants, causing heavy casualties among the defense forces. Upon receiving the distress signal, Eden had immediately dispatched the guard to assist the pipeline defense zone. The guard was Eden's last line of defense, not to be deployed lightly. For the safety of the governor, they had to solve the problem quickly and return to the court district. Watching the assault craft disappear into the sky, Eri and the others finally relaxed. If the governor had sent the guard, there was no enemy they couldn't defeat. Those guys are strong, Eri remarked, looking at the burning remains of the giant mutant. Case scoffed. They've all undergone deadly cybernetic surgery. Us regular folks can't compare. You think I'd have a chance? Maybe the governor would upgrade me too, Eri mused. That's a top-secret program of the court district. Ask too many questions, and you might get yourself killed. Rumor has it the previous governor was executed by an inquisitor because of it. Case crouched next to the mutant remains, inspecting something with interest. How do you know so much? Eri crouched down next to him. Because I use my brain, unlike you, a reckless beast. Ha, you're right. I don't like thinking. Something's off, Case said, pulling a mechanical part from the mutant's flesh. I have reason to believe this thing was artificially created. Created? By who? The Hoffman family scumbags? The gangs? Or maybe those heretics in the Underhive? This reeks of a conspiracy. Eri scratched his head, trying to process it. His brain itched like something was about to grow out of it. We're just grunts. Let's report this and let the bigwigs in the court district deal with it. You could have said that earlier, so I wouldn't have wasted my brain power. The gunfire in the pipeline defense zone gradually quieted down. With the guards' help, the defense forces had finally defeated the mutant horde. The battle was over, and the logistics department's convoy began arriving at the front lines. Dressed in black armor, the logistics personnel quickly disembarked and started their work. But they didn't bother with the wounded soldiers, even watching some die without lifting a finger. The logistics department had come to retrieve the bodies of both mutants and soldiers' valuable sources of protein. As for the soldiers' lives, that was none of their concern. There were always more people willing to join the defense forces, desperate for food. Eri and his men walked through the battlefield, searching for any survivors, providing whatever simple aid they could. Without proper medical supplies, it was the best they could do. Suddenly, Eri saw logistics personnel dragging away an unconscious, wounded soldier, throwing him onto the body cart. "What the hell are you doing?" he roared. Chapter 28, Conflict. Eri charged forward in a fit of rage, kicking over one of the logistics division's black armored corpse collectors. Sensing trouble, the armed forces of the logistics division immediately stepped in, pointing their guns at Eri. To ensure the smooth collection of valuable bodies, the logistics division had its own well-equipped armed forces to maintain order. In terms of status, they were far above the defense forces, controlling the distribution of resources not only for the defense forces but also for the entire territory. From the perspective of the court district's officials, the defense forces, composed of underhive refugees, were nothing but expendable assets easily replaced with more manpower. Warning: no one is allowed to interfere with the logistics division's collection operations. Step back. The black armored soldiers of the logistics division ordered, pressing closer to Eri with their weapons raised. "They're still alive! They're alive!" Eri shouted furiously, glaring down the barrels of their guns. "You scum of the court district, can't you see these men aren't dead yet?" Bang! A warning shot was fired into the air by one of the black armored soldiers. "Step back! Stand down, Cyclops!" Case pulled Eri back. "Calm down. We can't fight them. Let me handle this." Seeing Case step in, Eri clenched his fists but reluctantly held back, though his eyes still burned with fury as they fixed on the logistics soldiers. Case appeared calm, but the veins pulsing on his forehead betrayed his anger. He stepped forward, suppressing his emotions, and addressed the logistics division. "The protein recovery guidelines clearly state that the collection of living people is prohibited. Those soldiers are still alive. You are violating the regulations." From within the logistics team, a man in a black coat adorned with the golden lion insignia of House Grant DeVille Lap, a logistics officer, stepped forward. Pushing his glasses up his nose, DeVille replied coldly, "That was the old regulation. Given the current shortage of supplies, the guidelines have been revised." He paused and added, "Under the new protein recovery protocols, if a subject is deemed beyond medical treatment, we are authorized to collect them." Case took a deep breath. These are loyal soldiers who gave everything to protect the residential district. They don't deserve this. You're killing them. DeVille sighed with feigned regret. "I'm sorry, but if we don't gather enough protein, more people will starve to death." "But you haven't even tried to treat them. How can you decide they're beyond saving?" DeVille's expression hardened. "The logistics division operates under its own authority. You have no right to interfere. We are following the regulations, and you will comply. I won't let you take our men." Eri shouted, pulling out his gun and aiming it at DeVille. "Touch them, and I'll blow your brains out." Immediately, the black armored soldiers of the logistics division raised their guns, aiming at both Eri and Case. "Disarm immediately, or you will be executed." Seeing their leader surrounded, the rest of Eri's unit surged forward, their anger boiling over. "Damn the court district scum! We'll take you down. Yet. We fight for the court district, go hungry, and now they want to take our lives too. If anyone lays a hand on the boss, we'll kill them." The standoff escalated rapidly, the tension thickening as the two sides faced off, ready to explode into violence. DeVille sneered as he looked around. "Do you intend to betray the court district? Don't forget, it's the governor who gave you underhive scum everything. Without him, you'd still be starving in the dirt." His voice dripped with venom as he continued, "If you dare rebel, do you think you can stand against the guard? Is this how you repay the governor's mercy? If you become traitors, there will be only one fate for you all, death. And your families? They'll be executed as traitors too. Put down your weapons now. This is your last chance." Case, his eyes locked on DeVille, whispered urgently, "Eri, if you don't want everyone to die with you, you need to calm down. The court district held all the power, the elite soldiers, the control of supplies, and the families of the troops, all under their jurisdiction. This control made rebellion almost impossible." Eri clenched his teeth, the red light from his mechanical eye flashing menacingly, but his sense of responsibility forced him to suppress his desire to kill. He had to protect his men. Face flushed with anger, Eri growled through gritted teeth, "I want to speak to the governor. I don't believe he would treat loyal soldiers like this." "You want to see the governor?" Deville let out a derisive snort. The thought seemed to offend him more than having a gun pointed at him. To him, this underhive scum daring to ask to see the governor was an insult. Deville sneered, "The governor is the most noble ruler of Urth. He is the source of all we have. I have served the court district for 80 years, as did my father, my grandfather, and my great-grandfather. We've worked ourselves to death, yet none of us has ever had the honor of meeting the governor." He straightened up, pride swelling in his voice. "It is the greatest wish of my family to one day be formally received by the governor. Then, I will proudly present my family name and the contributions we've made. I will receive the Golden Lion insignia as a symbol of our loyalty, directly from the governor's hand." For generations, the Grant family had enforced strict loyalty training on their subordinates. After the Great Purge, most of the court district's officials remained fanatically loyal to the governor. Some, like Deville, had taken this loyalty to the point of worship. His family had served the court district and the governor for generations, and from a young age, Deville had been steeped in the teachings of loyalty. Each morning, his elderly mother would adjust his collar before he left for work, reminding him to serve the governor well, to bring honor to their family. Deville was willing to sacrifice everything for the governor, even though the governor had never known his name, nor the contributions his family had made. After all, there were too many families like his in the court district for the governor to remember them all. Only by making exceptional contributions could one even hope to be noticed. And now was Deville's chance. The harder things got, the more he would prove his loyalty. Deville glared at Eri. "Tell me, what right does an underhive rat like you have to meet the governor?" Faced with Deville's question, Eri was speechless. The vast gap in their social standing crushed his spirit. Of course, the noble governor would never meet someone as insignificant as Eri. If it hadn't been for the chaos in the hive, he would never have had the chance to reach the upper hive. Like his ancestors before him, he would have spent his life scraping by in the polluted wastelands of the underhive, never seeing the sun. To ask for a meeting with the governor? It was madness. With a heavy heart, Eri lowered his gun. Deville sneered and motioned for the black-armored soldiers to disarm Eri and Case, taking their weapons. He turned to the anxious soldiers surrounding them and reassured them, "Don't worry. Neither you nor those two will be harmed. As long as you don't interfere with the Logistics Division's recovery work, I have no authority to punish you. After all, the governor needs you scum. Your lives are needed to protect the court district's safety. For that, I hold a small amount of respect for you, nothing more." Deville turned to the corpse collectors. "Continue the recovery operation." End of chapter. == Check out my Patreon for plus 20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com/Zalum. Plus 500 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. Chapter 29, The Governor's Speech. At Deville's command, the corpse collectors from the Logistics Division resumed their grim work, efficiently dragging bodies and packing them onto the transport vehicles. Soon, another young soldier collapsed into unconsciousness, his injuries too severe. A collector approached, opening a body bag, ready to take the man away. But this time, he was met with resistance. "Please, I beg you. My son's injuries aren't that serious. Just one med shot could save him." An old soldier, his hair grey from years of service, clung desperately to his son, refusing to let the corpse collector take him. The old man's pleas fell on deaf ears. In the current dire circumstances, even the most basic med supplies were far more valuable than the lives of these defense soldiers. The black armored guards of the Logistics Division surrounded them, their mechanical voices cold and unfeeling, warning. "No interference with Logistics Division collection operations will be tolerated. Stand back from the protein source immediately or face execution." The old man, seemingly oblivious to the warning, continued his desperate begging. "Please, don't take my son. I'll take his place. I beg you." The black-armored soldiers ignored him. This scene was all too familiar, and their regulations left no room for mercy. They were bound by the strict rules of the Logistics Division. Failure to uphold the protocols could mean their own execution. Deville, watching the scene unfold, remained emotionally detached. His years of overseeing these operations had hardened his heart. He saw not people, but pure protein, which could be processed into rations to keep the workforce alive and maintain control over the territory. To him, it was simply a matter of survival. The court district's rule had to be preserved, even if it required harsh measures. The black armored guards raised their guns, now pointing at the old soldier and his unconscious son. Final warning. Execution imminent. Around them, the other soldiers, their faces red with fury, gripped their weapons tightly. They could no longer bear to watch this injustice unfold. On the other side of the scene, Kays noticed the determination in Erai's eyes. He knew there was no stopping his old comrade now. Nodding in silent agreement, Kays prepared to back Erai up as tensions reached their boiling point. The entire battlefield felt like a volcano on the verge of eruption. Deville stood protected behind his shield-bearing guards, sensing the escalating tension but making no effort to de-escalate. The law had to be upheld without exception. Any sign of weakness could lead to chaos, undermining the authority of the court district. Deville had already shown restraint once, now, all that remained was to enforce the rules with unwavering resolve. Click! The sound of safeties being released echoed through the air. Everyone held their breath, bracing for the bloodshed to follow. Suddenly, the piercing noise of a loudspeaker blared through the air. Warning! All units below, drop your weapons immediately, or you will be deemed traitors to the court district. A black and gold strike ship, flashing red warning lights, hovered overhead. Its speakers continued to broadcast the warning, while two heavy cannons trained on the crowd below. All units below, drop your weapons immediately, or you will be deemed traitors to the court district. The warning played on repeat, leaving everyone confused. Why was the strike ship aiming its cannons at its own personnel? Deville recognized the golden lion emblem on the ship and quickly ordered the black-armored soldiers to stand down. All of you, drop your weapons. That's a ship from the Spire. The Spire? The governor. Years of ingrained fear made the logistics personnel immediately comply, dropping their weapons and standing at attention before the strike ship. The defense soldiers, equally terrified, followed suit. Erai and Kays exchanged tense glances, both watching the strike ship above with apprehension. Everyone waited, their fate hanging in the balance. Finally, the ship's loudspeaker fell silent, before announcing in a formal tone. The Honorable Governor Eden Grant has officially repealed Article 9 of the Protein Collection Protocols. No living person may be harvested for protein. All logistics personnel are to cease use of force and assist in the treatment of the wounded. After completing their tasks, they are to report back to headquarters for further orders and retraining. The voice paused, letting the gravity of the statement sink in. Everyone was in shock, especially the logistics personnel, who stood frozen in disbelief. The loudspeaker crackled once more. The following is an address from the great and merciful Governor Eden Grant. Silence is mandatory. Failure to comply will be considered treason. Everyone held their breath, standing at attention. Deville quickly straightened his clothes, ready to listen with the utmost reverence to the governor's words. ZZZT. The recorded speech began, Eden's voice filled with authority. Soldiers. I am Eden Grant, your governor. You have protected the court district and made great sacrifices. I offer my deepest respect to all members of the defense forces. At the same time, I must express my guilt. You have not been treated as you deserve, and for that, I am sorry. I vow to you that from now on, your efforts will be rewarded, and your contributions will be honored. A rescue team is on the way. The court district will do everything in its power to ensure no soldier is abandoned. The court district stands with you. The recording ended, and the strike ship rose back into the sky, joining several other ships as they returned to the Spire. At the same moment, rescue vehicles arrived on the scene. Medics rushed out, immediately tending to the injured soldiers. The old soldier, still holding his son, begged for help. A medic injected his son with a precious med shot, and the young man's breathing began to stabilize, finally out of danger. The old soldier, overwhelmed with relief, collapsed to his knees, sobbing in the direction of the retreating strike ship. Thank you, Governor. The soldiers around him felt a surge of emotion. Many had tears in their eyes. For so long, they had been treated as less than human, mere fodder for the war machine. Their lives were meaningless, their deaths unnoticed, their sacrifices unacknowledged. But today, they had been recognized by the most powerful man on the planet. They were heroes. Erai, unable to contain his excitement, nudged Kays. Did you hear that? The governor called us heroes. Let's see those logistics bastards dare mess with us now. Case glanced at the others, smiling slightly, but chose to remain silent. Meanwhile, the logistics personnel stood in stunned silence, unsure of how to proceed. They turned to Deville for guidance. Chapter 30, Governance. Deville's mind was still in a haze. He fully understood the current state of food reserves in the court district. If the logistics division were to implement the governor's new laws as instructed, in less than a month, the food supply would be exhausted. At that point, the logistics division would be powerless, unable to sustain operations, and chaos and starvation would break out across the regions. Taking a deep breath, Deville cleared his mind of these chaotic thoughts. The great and merciful governor was always right, there was no room for doubt. His duty was to follow orders without question and ensure his family was not disgraced. Having resolved this, he shouted at his logistics subordinates. "Why are you all standing there? Didn't you hear the governor's orders? All logistics personnel, start aiding in the rescue efforts. We can't let any more soldiers die due to lack of care." "Yes, sir." The logistics division personnel snapped out of their daze, quickly organizing themselves to join the rescue teams. Eri stormed over, grabbing Deville by the collar, his fury palpable. "What about that soldier? Where did you take him? Damn it!" Deville suddenly remembered. A critically injured but unconscious soldier had been mistaken for dead and tossed into the corpse transport truck. The governor had now issued new orders, and if this soldier died due to the logistics division's negligence, it would be a severe dereliction of duty. Pushing Eri aside, Deville sprinted to the transport truck. Climbing aboard, he waded through the filthy blood and gore, finally locating the soldier. But the man had stopped breathing. "You can't die." Deville's heart raced as he called for medics. "Get over here and save him." Deville frantically began administering chest compressions and mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. After completing a cycle of life-saving measures, the soldier's breathing returned, albeit faintly. The situation was dire, he could die at any moment. Deville looked up at the medics, shouting desperately. "He's still alive. I need a med shot, there's no time." "Where is it?" Just as the soldier was about to slip away for good, Eri rushed over with a med shot in hand. "Catch!" Panting heavily, Eri hurled the shot towards Deville, who caught it mid-air. SHHHH. The med shot was injected into the soldier's neck, and its effects kicked in instantly. The soldier's chest rose sharply, and he gasped for air, coughing violently. He was alive. Deville was overjoyed and turned to share his relief with the soldiers, but upon seeing their cold stares, he quietly moved aside, letting them take their comrade away. Without a word of complaint, Deville returned to his duties, determined to fulfill the governor's orders. Across the entire pipeline defense zone, everyone was following the governor's commands, working diligently to rescue as many as possible. Meanwhile, far away in his office at the Spire, Eden was feeling deeply troubled. 2 hours ago, he had visited the Ministry of Defense to inquire about the state of the defense forces, only to stumble upon a distress call from the pipeline defense zone. Yet, the ministry hadn't dispatched any reinforcements. According to their calculations, sacrificing half of the defense forces in the zone would be sufficient to wipe out the mutant horde. As such, they saw no need to deploy the court district's precious elite forces. Eden was left speechless. If the soldiers died, how was he supposed to gather hope energy? Besides, these were real people, warriors fighting for the court district. Without hesitation, Eden had immediately sent the elite guard to support them, hoping to minimize casualties. He also ordered the logistics division to organize a rescue operation. That's when he learned the logistics division wasn't sending aid, they were sending corpse collectors. The logistics division's rescue teams had been disbanded long ago, and their main task now was to produce and collect protein sources. Upon realizing the state of affairs in both the logistics division and the defense forces, Eden could only curse, "Damn it all." But his anger had no outlet. Without the logistics division's ruthless efficiency, the court district and the entire territory would have collapsed long ago. Fortunately, Eden had arrived in time, and there was still hope. He possessed the power of the little sun, and that was his key to changing everything. Eden immediately repealed parts of the protein collection protocols and ordered the logistics division to hastily organize a new rescue squad. He also sent strike ships to the defense zone to prevent further conflicts and deliver the news. Now that the strike ships had returned, Eden could feel the slow but steady rise of hope energy. The rescue mission had gone well, successfully appeasing the defense forces. This operation alone had netted him nearly 20,000 hope energy points. The rescue had been a success, but it had come at the cost of depleting most of the precious medical supplies from the Spire's vault. Still, Eden couldn't afford to worry about that now. He needed hope energy for the upcoming Emperor's Ascension Festival. It was vital that he eliminated any threats that could disrupt the ceremony. For now, Eden could only pray that there wouldn't be another mutant horde or crisis in the coming days. He no longer had the resources for another rescue mission. With a heavy heart, Eden returned to the mountain of paperwork on his desk, pushing through the endless administrative tasks. He also checked on the progress of the statue's restoration, urging the workers to finish everything before the festival. As he faced the ever-growing pile of documents, Eden felt utterly exhausted. Administrative work really is soul-crushing. No wonder the previous me left it all to Baeve. He was only managing one district on one planet, a population of several million, and it was already this overwhelming. How much worse must it be for the High Lords governing hundreds of worlds? No matter how advanced their body enhancements were or how long they lived, they still couldn't escape the crushing burden of bureaucracy. Many had literally worked themselves to death. The thought sent a chill down Eden's spine. He could already see a bleak future ahead. Once things stabilized, all this paperwork was going straight back to Baeve. He decided then and there to treat Baeve better from now on and to provide him with the best protection possible. People who could handle this kind of workload were truly invaluable. After struggling through several more files, Eden finally reached his limit. His head felt like it was filled with lead, and his vision swam with stars. This is too much. Even in another world, I still have to work overtime. With tears in his eyes, he downed a supplement shot. His foggy mind cleared, and he forced himself to continue. There was still important military business to address. One file caught his attention. It reported that the Defense Forces Commander and Chief of Staff had both perished in the recent mutant assault. New leaders needed to be appointed immediately. Eden schemed through the list of candidates and wasn't impressed by any of them. Traditionally, the top positions in the Defense Forces were filled by people from the court district, but Eden had other plans. That wouldn't align with what he intended to do next. He decided to promote someone from the lower ranks instead, ideally someone from the lower hive, someone who could empathize with the soldiers. He ordered the Ministry of Defense to send him the profiles of all non-court district officers, and after carefully reviewing them, he selected a new commander and chief of staff. Eden was pleased with his choices. These two, they look like protagonists. End of chapter. == Check out my Patreon for plus 20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com/Zalum. Plus 500 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. Chapter 31, Meeting the Governor. On the defensive line of the pipeline zone, the rescue work was nearing its end. Eri glared at Deville, scum from the logistics department, don't think we'll thank you just because you helped save people. I don't need the gratitude of you underhive dwellers. Deville responded with an air of superiority. Everything I do is for the governor. One day, he will recognize my loyalty and contributions. Damn bastard, what are you so proud of? We're the heroes here. I heard the governor hands out some kind of medal to heroes. Maybe the ship coming to pick us up is already on its way. We'll soon be heading to the Spire to meet the governor. You'll be so jealous. Eri grumbled. Deville laughed, as if he had heard a joke, ignorant underhivers. He turned away, no longer wanting to see Eri, who he compared to a grox. Suddenly, an assault craft flew in, landing not far from them, drawing everyone's attention. A Spire assault ship. The hatch opened, and an official from the Department of Military Affairs, flanked by 2 guards, approached Eri and Case. The official's face was cold as he glanced at them. Captain Eri, Cadet Staff Officer Case, you are to accompany me to the Spire immediately. The governor wishes to see you. What? Everyone present was stunned. By the Emperor, you've got to be kidding me. Eri couldn't believe it. He had just been speaking nonsense earlier, but now the governor had actually summoned him. The military official's tone was unmistakable. The governor is waiting for you. This is an order. To disobey is to betray. He gestured for them to follow. Realizing it was true, Eri smirked at Deville. Eat that, bastard. I'm off to meet the governor. Deville stood there in shock, muttering to himself, how is this possible? Why would the governor meet an underhiver? Case, snapping out of it, grabbed Eri by the arm. "Come on, Cyclops, let's go." Quickly, Eri and Case followed the official into the assault ship. The craft took off, heading toward the Spire in the Royal District. Deville was left standing there, covered in the dust kicked up by the departing ship. Gone was his earlier arrogance, his eyes fixed on the direction the craft had flown. Determined, he vowed silently to work even harder in fulfilling the governor's orders with twice the loyalty. He had to achieve his family's long-held dream, an official audience with the governor. He couldn't lose to an underhiver. Inside the assault craft, Eri nudged Case. "Hey, kid, why do you think the governor wants to see us? He's not really going to give us some kind of medal, is he?" "Stop dreaming, that's impossible," Case replied after thinking for a moment. "I bet the governor wants to talk to us about the mutant surge. You remember the huge explosion that happened at the first pipeline defense line, right? The blast hit the command center directly. Are you saying those command center bastards might all be dead?" Eri rubbed his chin thoughtfully. The commanders of the defense forces were all from the Royal District, and they had never treated the defense forces as people. They often created brutal combat plans with no regard for the soldiers' lives, leading to heavy casualties. "We've heard nothing from the command centers so far. It's possible they were all wiped out." "Damn, that's a big deal." Eri slapped his thigh, a mischievous glint in his eye. But when he noticed the cold gaze of the military official opposite him, he quickly toned it down. The assault ship landed on the Spire's estate landing pad. As Eri and Case stepped off the craft, they were awestruck by the sight before them. The Spire estate, renovated by the Grant family for millennia, was the epitome of luxury and artistry on the entire planet. It was the perfect fusion of imperial cold architecture and Victorian grandeur. Neither of them had ever seen anything so breathtaking and magnificent in their lives. Though they weren't well versed in art, the beauty it conveyed was something anyone could feel. Eri, at that moment, didn't know how to express the awe in his heart. If a wandering poet stood here, they might compose 100 beautiful poems. "Damn, this place is gorgeous." Eri marveled as he took a deep breath. "Even the air here is sweet." He felt lighter all over, almost floating, even a bit dizzy. The Spire estate had its own protective shield and air filtration system to prevent extreme situations. The estate's rear garden was even filled with green plants. The air here was the freshest on all of Earth. Eri, having spent his life breathing in the polluted and heavily recycled air of the lower hive, was bound to have such a reaction when inhaling pure air for the first time. Eri, with his single eye, looked around curiously. Soon, he spotted the 100-meter-tall statue of the God Emperor. "Emperor above, is that thing really this big?" From afar, it hadn't seemed impressive, but standing near it, he realized how massive it truly was. Case squinted, noticing something unusual. "There are people up there, repairing the statue." He frowned, deep in thought, but the military official's cold voice interrupted him. "You may proceed." With that, the official turned and re-entered the craft. He had no chance to meet the governor himself. The assault ship flew away. Eri and Case were led into the Spire estate. After undergoing a series of checks, including body searches, decontamination, disinfection, and mental tests, Eri caught a whiff of his own scent and was almost intoxicated by it. "Damn, this stuff smells amazing. Don't say anything foolish when we meet the governor." Case appeared calm, but deep down, he was nervous. After all, they were about to meet the most powerful person on the planet, a man who held its fate in his hands. After a lengthy process, they were finally notified. They could go see the governor. Inside the governor's office, Eden stretched, having just received the report. The men he had summoned were about to arrive. He picked up 2 files from his desk and reviewed them. They were the dossiers of Eri and Case. Immortal Eri, cunning Case. The more he read about them, the more they seemed like protagonists. They reminded him of the old Cyclops and little Case from the legends. Talented people. Eden nodded in satisfaction. With such strategists at my side, what do I have to fear from this Warhammer 40K universe? Soon, Eri and Case were ushered into the governor's office by a maid. You've finally arrived. Good work. Eden greeted them warmly. Damn, cough. Governor, sir. Seeing the young, noble, and overwhelmingly charismatic governor, both Eri and Case were momentarily flustered, unsure of how to respond. Case controlled his slightly trembling hand and bowed deeply. Governor, I offer you my most sincere greetings. Eri, seeing this, hurriedly stammered and followed suit. Governor, I greet you as well. Chapter 32, A New Appointment. If you like the fanfic, please leave a review. It will help the fanfic a lot, and it will motivate me to upload more. Seeing the two of them a bit nervous, Eden waved his hand in a comforting gesture. There's no need to be so tense. I already know about your deeds, so let's get straight to the point. He stepped forward and handed them both a document, stamped with the governor's seal, along with badges. In recognition of your outstanding performance and significant contributions, I hereby appoint you both as the commander and staff officer of the Planetary Defense Forces of Urth. Eri and Kaze stared in shock at the appointment documents and badges in their hands. The governor had just made them the two highest-ranking officers in the defense forces. It was as if he had handed the entire defense forces to these two underhivers. Such trust! The two of them were momentarily speechless. So, what do you say? Are you willing to take on this responsibility? Eden looked at them with anticipation. Faced with the governor's expectant gaze, Eri was beyond excited. Damn! Governor, you're a good man. I'll take the commander position. Kaze, on the other hand, remained much more composed. He had many doubts, unsure why the governor trusted them so much. However, faced with such an opportunity, he gladly accepted. No matter the reasons, with them taking on the positions of commander and staff officer, the soldiers of the defense forces would have a better future. He gave a formal salute. I accept the appointment. Eden nodded with satisfaction, then dropped another bombshell. The defense forces have given too much for the royal district. From now on, the administrative level of the defense forces will be elevated, making them equal to other combat units in the royal district. This would be a major change. After the rebellion, the original defense forces had been almost completely wiped out. The few remaining regiments had been trapped in the Underhive and Lower Hive, unable to return to the royal district. In response to the new operational needs, Bayef had reorganized the defense forces. He recruited suitable people from the Underhive refugees to form new regiments. The newly formed defense forces were essentially treated as disposable cannon fodder. Their status had plummeted, almost akin to slaves, and they often couldn't even fill their stomachs. Their combat effectiveness was a shadow of the former defense forces. Eden decided to change this, restoring honor and purpose to the defense forces. The soldiers would no longer be slaves but rather defenders of Earth, heroes deserving of respect. In short, the defense forces will no longer be restricted by others. Your lives have value and should be honored. No one will dare look down on you again. Eri was so moved that he trembled, his eyes moistening with emotion. His bionic eye even flashed brightly in response. With a solemn vow, Eri declared, I, immortal Eri, swear that even if I descend into hell, I will never betray your trust. Kaze, too, was touched at this point. He bowed his head and said, Governor, I pledge my loyalty to you. Eden nodded. The royal district needs a strong and loyal defense force. You both are capable, so I will give you full autonomy to recruit and train the defense forces in your own way. He patted both of them on the shoulder. The defense forces are in your hands now. Don't disappoint me. The governor's unwavering trust moved Eri deeply, and he silently vowed to repay this trust with his life if necessary. Kaze's opinion of the young governor shifted as well, and he now treated Eden with even greater respect. This was exactly the result Eden had hoped for. To be honest, he had no idea how to train the defense forces or how to ensure their loyalty. Nor did he have the time or energy to manage them. His role was to select the right people and let them do their job. Since Eri and Kaze were talented, he would give them the autonomy they needed to succeed. Afterward, Eden invited Eri and Kaze to join him for lunch. The Spire estate, stripped of its gold and jewels, no longer appeared so extravagant. But thanks to Linda's efforts, the artisans had redecorated the estate with other materials, giving it an even more refined appearance. Eri and Kaze sat in the lavish banquet hall, feeling uneasy. They had never been in such a high-class place before and were afraid of making fools of themselves. Under Eden's new guidelines, meals at the Spire estate had become much simpler. Today's lunch was Grok's steak, arcanberry pastries, and a side of Manola wine. These dishes were nothing special to Eden. But for those outside the Spire, they were unattainable delicacies. Eri took a bite of the Grok's steak, and his mechanical eye flashed brilliantly. Damn, this stuff is delicious. He didn't know how to describe the flavor, only that it was 1,000 times better than the corpse starch and irradiated mushrooms of the lower hive. He eagerly sliced into the steak, almost reaching out to grab it with his hands. But with the governor seated across from him, he restrained himself from being too brazen. Still, his hands trembled, and the knife scraped noisily against the plate. Case, sitting beside him, was having a similar experience. The tender, juicy steak and the sweet, tangy arcanberry pastry had completely won him over. His taste buds were exploding with joy. He tried his best to maintain his composure, to keep up appearances. He couldn't embarrass himself in front of the governor. Eden quietly ate his steak while observing the two men. He knew very well how rare such food was for those outside the Spire. So, he remained silent and didn't draw attention to them, allowing them to enjoy the meal fully. Eden decided that in the future, he would invite more important subordinates to share meals with him. Not only would it be a way to reward them, but it would also strengthen their bond. As they ate, Eden noticed Eri wiping away tears. Eri looked up at him, hesitating as if he wanted to say something. After a moment of hesitation, Eri finally spoke. "Governor. Commander Eri, feel free to speak your mind." Eden maintained a gentle tone, trying not to put too much pressure on him. "I was just thinking about the soldiers in the defense forces, they're still hungry." Eri stammered slightly. Case raised his head and added. "For the past few months, the defense forces have been severely undersupplied, sometimes even worse off than the factory workers. The long-term hunger has drastically weakened the combat effectiveness of the defense forces, and some have even starved to death. If we don't replenish supplies soon, the consequences could be even more severe." Hearing Case's words, Eden fell silent. He knew about these issues. With food shortages in the Royal District, the logistics department had first cut the supplies of the defense forces. According to their calculations, most new recruits in the defense forces didn't survive more than 3 months anyway. Since they were seen as disposable, whether they were fed or not didn't really matter. As long as they had enough strength to hold a gun, that was enough. Thus, the supply for the defense forces had been continuously reduced, to the point where even factory workers were better off. In fact, this wasn't an isolated case. Resource allocation had been cut across the board, even for administrative units. Yes, the staff officer. Case is absolutely right. Eri nodded eagerly, looking at Eden with pleading eyes. "Governor, the soldiers need food." Chapter 33, Notification from the Royal District. Seeing the governor's silence, Eri's heart jumped into his throat, his body trembling slightly. He was afraid. Afraid that the governor would be angry. Even more afraid that the governor would reject his plea. Gulp. Case swallowed hard, fearing that Eri's words might have angered the governor. From the information Case had gathered, he could infer that the situation regarding the Royal District's resource reserves was dire. Perhaps there really weren't enough resources to supply the defense forces. The atmosphere in the banquet hall became stifling. Just as the two were growing more anxious, Eden snapped out of his thoughts and looked at Eri and Case. "An hour ago, I issued an order to the logistics department to increase the defense forces' resource allocation. The new supplies should be in preparation for distribution, double the current amount." This was a bold move on his part, essentially advancing the defense forces' supplies for the next month. And it wasn't just the defense forces, other units' supplies would also increase, though it was all advanced from next month's resources. According to Eden's resource distribution plan, by the time the Emperor's Ascension Festival arrived, the Royal District would be completely depleted of supplies. There was no other way. Empty promises weren't enough. He needed to provide tangible benefits to give everyone a reason to believe in the promises he had made. That's why Eden decided to advance the Royal District's resources, using up everything prepared for next month. This meant that for this month, they'd have twice the amount of supplies to boost everyone's morale. Of course, the downside was that after today, there might be no tomorrow. If, in a month, no new sources of supplies were found, the territory would fall into a state of extreme hardship. But to gather and harness the power of hope, he had no choice. Rather than prolonging their slow decline, it was better to gamble everything on a final push. As he had said before, this was a high-stakes gamble. If he could gather enough hope power during the Emperor's Ascension Festival, he would be able to use the portal to bring back the unharvested crops and ancient agricultural technology from the Green Wave farms aboard the Space Hulk. That would solve the food shortage, allowing him to focus on other matters, developing the territory and reclaiming the Hive City. Rather than continuing to weaken, like countless other worlds in the dark corners of the Imperium, waiting to be swallowed whole by darkness. Eden's eyes were filled with determination. With these supplies, the soldiers shouldn't starve anymore. I can promise you that this hardship is only temporary. The Royal District has found a solution to the food problem. When you return, please tell the soldiers that the Royal District will not forget their sacrifices. Their conditions will improve, and they must improve. The governor had agreed to give the defense forces more supplies and promised even more in the future. Eri and Kays were both overwhelmed with joy at the news. Eri shot to his feet, tears streaming down his face. "Governor, I speak for all the soldiers when I thank you." Kays quickly stood up to add, "What Eri means is, we pledge the utmost loyalty on behalf of all the soldiers." He performed a gesture of reverence, a symbol of deep respect and awe. Yes, exactly." Eri nodded rapidly. Eden smiled faintly and motioned for them to sit down. He raised his glass and made a toast, "Enjoy the food. There will be bread, there will be milk, and everything will get better." Royal District, Administrative Residence. The residential district was close to the Sacred Plaza and home to the officials of the Royal District. It boasted grand architecture and luxurious decorations. Compared to the Underhive, the residences here were of high quality, with precious space, free electricity, water, and other resources. That was the situation before. After the rebellion, the residential district had fallen into disrepair. Electricity, water, and other resources were no longer freely provided and had become intermittent. Yet compared to other parts of the territory, it was still paradise. There were relatively safe homes and a more stable food supply. Deville returned home, his face full of exhaustion. He carefully hung his black coat, the symbol of a logistics department officer, on the rack. It was his only decent piece of clothing left. The coat had been torn countless times, but under the patient care of his mother, Marty, it looked almost as good as new. She always showed such patience, keeping the household in perfect order. The floors and furniture in the house were meticulously cleaned, almost polished enough to reflect one's image. In the past, this work had been done by servants, but now, Marty did it all herself. She did her best to maintain the dignity of the Rapp family. "Deville, you're home." Marty happily walked over and kissed Deville on both cheeks. "You're just in time. You can join us for dinner." Marty returned to the kitchen, still in good spirits, preparing dinner. Before long, she placed the meal on the table. There were 3 portions. Each delicate porcelain plate held a third of a portion of wood chip bread, along with a few small pieces of corpse starch, garnished with a tiny wilted leaf. Looking at the food, Deville sighed deeply. The food supply had dwindled again. Times were getting tougher. Deville remembered his childhood when his father was alive, and the Rapp family had the dignity of almost being nobles. They never lacked food, enjoying soft bread, juicy steaks, and the occasional luxurious pastry. But ever since Urth's taxes were raised to the first-level prime rating, everything had changed. The crushing tax burden had brought Urth to its knees. Its surface ravaged by pollution, and billions of people perished. Deville's father had also died, worn out by the heavy administrative duties at the logistics department. It was those damned, incompetent officials in the Department of Internal Affairs on Holy Terra who caused all of this. Their miscalculations had ruined Urth and cost him his father. After his father's death, Deville took on the burden of the Rapp family. He passed the examinations and inherited his father's position. At the time, he believed he could work hard to take care of his mother and sister and restore the Rapp family's dignity. Then the rebellion happened. The oppressive taxes had sparked a terrible uprising. With many of the defense forces sent to the Underhive and Lower Hive to deal with mutations, the Royal District was left vulnerable. The heretic rebels seized the opportunity to attack the Upper Hive, nearly capturing the Royal District. Although the Royal District ultimately repelled the invaders, they lost control of the Underhive, leaving them trapped in the Upper Hive. The rebellion had almost snuffed out Urth's lifeline. In the years since, things had only gotten worse. Now, despite being an administrative officer in the Royal District, Deville could barely afford wood chip bread. "Brother, you're back." Deville's younger sister, Lilith, rushed out and hugged him. She hadn't seen him in days. Lilith was 16, with soft golden hair and a youthful vibrancy, her figure just beginning to develop. "How's your studying going?" "Humph, I've finished all my assignments. I'm way smarter than you." Despite the difficult times, Deville insisted that Lilith receive a full education, even after the Royal District had shut down the schools. Deville sat down to eat dinner with his mother and sister. He cut off a piece of the wood chip bread, chewing it slowly as the slightly moldy taste filled his mouth. After swallowing, he forced down a small piece of corpse starch. Looking at the meager portion of corpse starch on his plate, Deville couldn't help but worry. The governor had diverted a lot of resources, seemingly for some important plan. But according to the logistics department's calculations, many units wouldn't even have corpse starch to eat next month. As he looked up at his mother and sister, who were diligently eating their wood chip bread and corpse starch, Deville's eyes grew moist, tears blurring his vision. What was he going to do? Ding! The bell at the door's mailbox rang. It signaled an important notification from the Royal District. End of chapter. Check out my Patreon for plus 20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com/Zalum. Plus 500 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. Chapter 34, The Governor Hasn't Abandoned Us. Deville went to the door and retrieved the notification letter. He returned to the dining table and sat down to read it. Zzzt. The light above the table flickered a few times before going out, plunging the room into darkness. Lilith complained, another power outage. These blackouts are happening more and more often lately. The frequent outages were severely affecting her study progress. Marty pulled out a candle and lit it, the warm glow illuminating their faces. Brother, the food rations are getting smaller and smaller. What's really happening out there? Lilith stared at Deville, looking for answers. For safety reasons, Deville had strictly forbidden Lilith from leaving the administrative district, let alone venturing beyond the royal district. Other families in the district had done the same, shielding their children from the harsh and dangerous world outside. They had all agreed to keep the truth hidden, not wanting their children to face the grim reality of the outside world, for fear that despair would crush their spirits. Deville gently ruffled Lilith's hair, speaking in a reassuring tone. Outside? It's the same as always. The reduced food rations are just temporary. The problem will be solved soon. As he said these words, even he felt a bit uncertain. The governor will find a solution. He added, his tone becoming more resolute. That's not true. Lilith's voice trembled with emotion, and she was close to tears. These things were hard to keep secret, and children would always find ways to hear bits of information. Some even snuck out to see for themselves, returning terrified by what they had seen. I snuck out with Jenny to see for ourselves, and the situation outside is awful. People are dying everywhere. Those wearing black coats like yours shot several workers and dragged their bodies away. What? Didn't I tell you not to go out? Deville's voice rose in anger, it's too dangerous out there. What if something happened to you? I heard the workers say there's no more food in the royal district. The governor will stop food distribution, and everyone will starve. Lilith's eyes were filled with fear, is that true? That's a lie. The governor won't abandon us. I don't believe you. He hasn't done anything, it's all lies. Lilith. Deville was genuinely angry this time, not allowing anyone to insult the governor. Marty also gave Lilith a stern look, have you forgotten the Rapp family's rules? Lilith shrank back, her voice softening, I remember. The descendants of the Rapp family must be unconditionally loyal to and follow the great governor. Marty nodded in approval, patiently explaining, our ancestors were once slaves in the black mines, and it was the current governor's ancestors who freed us. They gave us a safe home in the upper hive and a prestigious job that has been passed down through the generations. In other words, everything we have is a gift from the governor and his family. Without him, we would be nothing. If the day ever comes when the governor is completely defeated, we will lose everything. Those outside the royal district, those underhive mobs. They will drag us out of our homes, hang us, and take everything we have. Lilith sighed, I understand now. Loyalty to the governor and protecting his rule is the same as protecting ourselves. As long as you understand. Deville's tone was stern, you're never to sneak out again. I don't want to find you in a corpse transport truck. Do you understand? Tears welled up in Lilith's eyes as she nodded, brother, I won't go out again. Let's eat. Deville placed the remaining half of his wood chip bread onto his sister's plate, eat more, so you can study well. As he lowered his head, he noticed an extra piece of wood chip bread on his plate. He looked at Marty, intending to return it, Mother, I'm not hungry. But Marty stopped him, her voice firm. You've lost weight. Eat up. You're the one going out to work, and you must maintain the dignity of the Rapp family. Don't let people think we can't even afford food. I'll never disgrace the Rapp family. Deville lowered his head, tears in his eyes, as he forced the wood chip bread into his mouth and chewed it vigorously, washing it down with water. After this little episode, the family returned to their quiet meal, focusing on the corpse starch on their plates. It wasn't an easy thing to swallow. As Deville struggled to choke down the corpse starch, he opened the important notification from the Royal District. In the candlelight, he carefully read the words. It was an order from the Royal District, summoning all Logistics Department personnel to gather at headquarters the next day for a new assignment. Excitedly, he exclaimed, "By the Emperor, I knew it! The governor hasn't abandoned us. He's found a way to solve the food crisis." What? Marty and Lilith were both surprised. Deville eagerly handed them the letter. "Look, it's from the governor. He says he's found a preliminary solution to the food problem, and now he needs everyone in the Royal District to work together. All hearts and minds united, working toward the same goal. He also said that everyone has worked hard during these tough times, and the food and supplies will return to normal. We'll all be fed so we can work harder. Everyone's contribution will be remembered. May the Royal District be with you." Deville's voice trembled with emotion as he read the governor's final words. He was overwhelmed with excitement. The governor's tone this time was different from before, clearer, more relatable, even with a hint of warmth. Marty nodded in admiration, as expected of the heir to the Grant family, with thousands of years of heritage. The governor truly has a way. Lilith was overjoyed. "Does this mean we won't have to eat wood chip bread and that nasty black stuff anymore?" Deville and Marty didn't tell her that the black stuff was corpse starch. Nor did they mention its actual composition. Lilith only knew it was something disgusting to eat. Deville looked at Lilith, his voice firm. "Yes, as long as we carry out the governor's plan and help the Royal District through this crisis, we won't have to eat this junk anymore." "Yay, that's great. Brother, you have to work really hard. The future of the Royal District depends on you." "Of course. For the governor, for the Royal District, and for you both, I won't slack off." Deville excitedly talked with his mother and sister for a while longer before retiring to bed early. He wanted to conserve his energy and be in peak condition to carry out the governor's new orders. Beep 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 for the governor. The electronic alarm from his bedside clock startled Deville awake. Chapter 35, The Governor's Speech. "For the governor." Deville silenced the alarm and repeated the phrase once more. He quickly went to the washroom, tidied his light blonde hair, and steeled his face with determination. Stepping out of his room and into the dining area, Marty had already prepared breakfast: a small piece of wood chip bread and some corpse starch. Deville sat down, eating while glancing at an old newspaper beside him. This had been his father's habit, one he had now picked up. Since the Hive's newspaper offices had mostly collapsed, new papers were no longer being published. He looked at these old papers merely to remember the better days of the Upper Hive. After finishing his meal, Deville walked to the door, put on his cold, black coat, and fastened his gold lion badge. In that instant, he transformed from a young man into the feared Black Reaper. Nowadays, the Logistics Department held immense power, controlling the distribution of resources in the Royal District, with the added authority to collect human protein by force if needed. Even as a low-ranking officer, Deville commanded fear. Marty came over to straighten his collar, reminding him. "Serve the governor well. Do not bring shame to our family." "I will, mother." This ritual had become a routine, a constant reminder to Deville. Loyalty to the governor must be maintained. Deville hugged his mother briefly before turning and heading out the door. The moment he stepped outside, his expression turned cold, and his steps became firm and resolute. As an administrative officer of the Royal District, responsible for protein collection, he could not afford to be merciful. Mercy meant weakness. If the people lost their fear of him, it wouldn't be long before he was dead. The mobs and cultists would find a way to stick a knife into him. Who could imagine that a cute little girl could hide a dagger, stabbing accurately into a man's throat? Who could guess that a frail, elderly woman carried a bio-bomb, shooting it out just before detonating it, taking several black armored soldiers down with her? Deville had seen too many such things, too many colleagues who had perished because of them. That was why he had to be cold, to instill fear. It was the only way to survive. It was the only way to complete his mission. It was the only way to serve the governor. He had chosen to be the one who fired the first shot, even if it meant mistakes would be made. This was the hive, treacherous and dangerous at every corner. The pale sunlight broke through the grey mist, faintly illuminating the swarm of logistics department personnel gathering from all directions. They were all equally cold, nodding slightly to each other as they formed into a column. A black tide of people marched in silence toward the headquarters of the logistics department. Soft sunlight poured into the bedroom, bringing with it a gentle warmth. Eden woke naturally, stretching comfortably. After being attended to by his maids, he washed up and made his way to the dining room, sipping his morning tea while listening to Bayef go over the day's agenda. The most important task for the morning was to visit the logistics department. For the Emperor's Ascension Festival and his subsequent plans, Eden had decided to make some adjustments to the department. All 10,000 members of the logistics department had gathered and were waiting for his inspection. Soon, Eden was in his hovercar, escorted by Carter and his guards, on the way to the headquarters of the logistics department. The headquarters, located to the left of the spire, was a cold, black building. In front of the building lay a small plaza. In the plaza stood the gathered logistics department personnel, lined up neatly, standing rigidly without a hint of slack. The area had been completely sealed off, with security forces from the logistics department tightly controlling the surroundings. They had to ensure the governor's safety, as any mistakes would be unforgivable. Deville stood near the front of the crowd, his body trembling slightly with excitement. The governor was about to arrive. Since hearing the news, Deville's heart had been restless. He took a deep breath, adjusting his breathing, and stood even straighter. He would present himself in the best possible manner to greet the governor. After waiting for nearly half an hour, the hovercar convoy from the Spire finally arrived. The governor had come. Like everyone else in the logistics department, Deville kept his gaze fixed forward, not daring to turn his head or look around carelessly, as this would be seen as disrespectful. Eden leaned back in the hovercar's seat, looking out at the densely packed crowd. He felt a bit overwhelmed. Oh, his social anxiety was about to kick in. There were just too many people. He regretted not recording a message beforehand and having a mechanical loudspeaker deliver it. The hovercar came to a stop, and Eden stepped out, exchanging a few polite words with the senior officers of the logistics department before heading straight to the platform at the front of the plaza. As he ascended the platform, the stirring march of the Urth rebel forces began to play, filling everyone with a sense of solemnity. Down below, Deville finally caught sight of the governor. He wore a magnificent and authoritative dark gold robe. His face was young and stern, with noble black hair. He was their great governor. So young, yet so capable. Since the rebellion, the governor had rarely left the Spire estate. As a result, many people had never seen him in person. Deville had seen the governor's portraits countless times, but this was his first time seeing him in real life. The sight filled him with overwhelming emotion, nearly bringing him to tears. The other young logistics department officers around him were equally moved. They had all received the most orthodox loyalty education from the royal district and were the most devoted followers of the governor. Eden steadied himself on the platform, and the music came to a halt. He looked out over the mass of people below and took a deep breath. At this distance, with so many people, he couldn't really make out anyone's face. All he had to do was follow the script and deliver the speech. Thud thud. Eden instinctively tapped the microphone, and his voice echoed through the plaza. Good morning, everyone. Thump. As soon as he spoke, the entire plaza responded with a synchronized stomp, the sound of boots striking the ground sending a shockwave through the air. The crowd stood tall and saluted with the imperial aquila gesture. The sea of black, the overwhelming reverence, left Eden strangely awestruck. The scene below seemed to inspire the crowd as well, and he could sense their confidence growing. The power of hope was gathering. Eden continued, following the prepared speech. The script had been masterfully crafted by the professional writers of the Department of Internal Affairs, perfectly expressing everything he wanted to convey. And it was incredibly motivational. Even as the speaker, Eden found himself moved. From now on, he would definitely leave his speech writing to that expert. The speech's content was simple. In plain language, it was a message to everyone: you've worked hard, and the governor has found a way to solve the problems. Trust the royal district, follow me, and you won't be let down. To put it even more simply, it was all about painting a picture of a better future. Perhaps because of the loyalty education they had received, or because previous governors had been too aloof and distant. Eden's more heartfelt speech left many in the logistics department with tears in their eyes. In that moment, the power of hope surged by nearly 3,000 points. Chapter 36, The List. Feeling the surge of hope energy, Eden was satisfied. This was definitely worth it. Taking advantage of the momentum while everyone was still emotionally charged from his earlier speech, Eden decided to strike while the iron was hot and formally announced the new discipline regulations for the logistics department. The new rules were strict, reducing some of the department's powers, including the ability to collect live human protein and the authority to execute obstructors at will. Of course, these restrictions applied only under safe conditions. In cases of emergencies, the personnel of the logistics department were still authorized to use any means necessary to protect themselves. Eden wasn't foolish enough to impose too many restrictions on the logistics department. That would be like putting himself in a cage. After all, this was Warhammer 40K, not the peaceful and civilized modern world from his past life. In the grim dark hive, gangs and the influence of chaos gods could turn ordinary citizens into violent rioters, murderous machines. Until he had complete control over the situation, harsh measures were necessary. He couldn't afford to show too much mercy, nor could he naively try to manage things the way he had in his past life. Perhaps, in the future, he could? Eden pondered this thought before concluding his speech with, "May the royal district be with you." The crowd saluted him with the imperial aquila gesture once again, and the plaza fell silent. It felt a little uncomfortable. Having finished his speech and receiving no applause, Eden felt a bit out of place. He made a mental note to arrange for applause at the end of his next speech, just to avoid this awkwardness. As he was about to step down, Yousef quietly approached and whispered, "Governor, you haven't mentioned the new department yet." Eden froze for a moment, realizing he had almost forgotten about the new department amidst the whirlwind of recent affairs. Returning to the podium, he announced the creation of a new department. Eden planned to recruit a select group from the logistics department to form a new division. These personnel would take on entirely new tasks, and he would personally oversee their training. The moment the announcement was made, the plaza erupted with gasps of surprise. However, the outbursts quickly ceased, as no one dared to disrespect the governor. Though the crowd remained silent, it was clear that excitement was boiling beneath the surface. Blood was pumping. The fact that the governor himself would be arranging and training the new department was enough to make the loyal young officers willing to give everything. Deville felt his blood racing, his heart pounding. He desperately wanted to be part of this new department. He yearned to offer his absolute loyalty to the governor. After announcing the news, Eden stepped back to take a break. The new department required 200 members, and Yousef was responsible for selecting the candidates. Personnel matters were his specialty. Yousef pulled out a list and began reading the names aloud, sending waves of tension rippling through the crowd. Each person selected was filled with excitement, standing tall and proud. To be chosen for the new department was a sign of excellence and personal recognition from the governor himself. It was an honor. They couldn't wait to return home and share the glory with their families. As the list grew shorter, those whose names hadn't been called grew increasingly anxious. Many silently prayed to the emperor and swore their allegiance to the governor, hoping their names would be among those chosen. Deville was no exception, his body tight with anticipation. By the emperor, my name must be called. As a descendant of the Rapp family, I cannot bring shame to my lineage. He had consistently been one of the top performers in the logistics department's internal evaluations. He had full confidence in himself, believing he would catch the governor's eye and be selected for the new department. But as the names dwindled and the remaining spots grew fewer, his heart began to sink. Each time a name was about to be called, he held his breath. Deville counted the remaining spots in his head, 197, 198, 199. When the overseer was about to announce the final name, Deville's heart was in his throat. He stared intensely at the platform. "Please, let it be me. Popov Katter." At the sound of the last name, the plump man next to Deville let out an excited yes. Before quickly covering his mouth, realizing his slip. He looked like a puffed-up guinea pig trying to hold back its breath. How could it be him? Deville was stunned. Popov, a coward who had always been at the bottom of the evaluations, had somehow been chosen for the new department. Deville had once been on a mission with that coward. When they were attacked by rioters, Popov had been too scared to even fire his weapon, bursting into tears instead. In the end, it was Deville who had resolved the situation, saving Popov's life. Deville always thought Popov was unworthy of the governor's grace. If not for Popov's father's significant contributions to the logistics department, Popov would have been kicked out long ago. Sensing Deville's gaze, Popov turned around and smiled at him. At that moment, Deville was struck by another, more troubling realization. The list of 200 names had been read, and his name wasn't among them. He hadn't been selected. Popov had made the cut, but he hadn't been chosen for the governor's personally led new department. A wave of shame washed over Deville. He had brought disgrace to his family. As he stood there in a daze, he suddenly noticed Popov still looking at him. Popov was still smiling. Was that fool mocking him? Deville struggled to suppress his emotions. He couldn't afford to do anything undignified. Anger was a sign of weakness. But then he realized that Popov's mouth was forming the words congratulations. At the same time, Deville noticed his colleagues looking at him with envy in their eyes. What was going on? Rap. The overseer's voice echoed through the speakers. Hearing his family name, Deville snapped to attention. He quickly realized that he was the only rap in the logistics department, meaning the overseer had just called his name. This meant he had been chosen for the new department, recognized by the governor. It seemed he had been so nervous that he miscounted the number of names and made a fool of himself. Understanding this, Deville's emotions felt like they had just been on a roller coaster, and an overwhelming sense of joy washed over him. He fought to maintain his composure, nodding slightly in acknowledgement to the envious colleagues around him. Though unnoticed, his eyes were already brimming with tears. After reading all the names, Yousef instructed those on the list to remain in place, while the others were dismissed to continue their work for the day. Deville and the other chosen members stood in orderly formation, waiting for their next orders. From a distance, they could see the governor approaching. As the governor drew closer, their hearts began to race. I'm so tired. Yep, meetings are definitely the best way to induce sleep. Eden inwardly groaned, rubbing his forehead to chase away the fatigue. Step by step, he approached Deville and the others. End of chapter. Check out my Patreon for plus 20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com/Zalum. Plus 500 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. Chapter 37, The Attack. Eden stopped in his tracks, looking at the spirited young men and women in front of him, nodding in satisfaction. Yousef had indeed done an excellent job, selecting the right talents based on Eden's criteria: young, loyal, and not too intimidating in appearance. There were many such young people in the royal district. After observing and experiencing the workings of the district these past days, Eden felt somewhat fortunate. Yousef's earlier purge of the royal district had swept away all opposition, including remnants of the Empire's loyalists. This had given Eden the freedom to execute his plans without getting bogged down in endless political scheming with opposition factions and noble families. To be honest, the royal district now had too many loyal personnel, and it was nearly impossible to find anyone rebellious. It was as if he could do anything he wanted. Because of this, he dared to carry out such sweeping reforms and bold strategies to gather the power of hope. Snapping out of his thoughts, Eden smiled warmly at the group before him. From now on, you will be members of the new department. The work ahead will be critical and will require your absolute effort and obedience. Do you understand? Yes. Their voices were loud and resolute. Good, Eden responded, clearly pleased with their attitude. Today, wrap up your current tasks, go home early, and get some rest. Tomorrow morning, gather here, and I will assign your new duties. Looking at the young recruits in front of him, he added with approval, you have been carefully chosen for your talents. You are all impressive, and the royal district will be with you. For the governor. Deville, overwhelmed with emotion, couldn't help but respond, his voice slightly trembling as he acknowledged the governor's praise. Seeing this, Eden casually patted Deville on the shoulder as a gesture of encouragement. Don't be too nervous. We'll have many opportunities to work together in the future. Why yes, sir. Deville was so shaken with excitement that he could hardly stand. Eden checked his pocket watch and gave a slight nod to the group before turning to leave under the escort of Carter and his guards. Yousef then took charge, immediately summoning senior officials from the logistics department to handle the transfer of duties for the new recruits. From this moment on, the new department members would no longer be responsible for any of the current tasks in the logistics department. Instead, they would directly receive orders from the governor. In essence, their status within the department had now risen to the top tier. They would answer only to the governor, no longer subject to the commands of other senior officers. Since this was a direct order from the governor, the logistics department's handling of the matter was impressively swift. In just one morning, the administrative paperwork for the new members was completed, and others were assigned to take over their previous duties. By the afternoon, everything was sorted out, and the new department members were released early to enjoy a rare half-day off. As Deville walked home, he felt as if he were floating on air. He was still basking in the excitement. By the Emperor, he thought, the great governor himself had patted him on the shoulder. What an honor! Deville, sir! He heard a voice calling out to him. From the sound of it, it was the coward, Popov. Deville stopped, turning around with a cold expression. What is it? Popov jogged over, his belly bouncing slightly, making him look rather comical. I was so envious of you just now, getting to interact with the governor so closely. Deville felt a bit proud but didn't show it. By the Emperor, I'm sure the governor will remember you. Once Popov started talking, he just couldn't stop. But Deville sighed inwardly. If only the governor had asked for his name. Then he could have proudly announced it and recounted the history and achievements of the Rapp family. In time, the governor would have known how loyal he and his family truly were. But it didn't matter, there would be other opportunities. As long as he performed well in the new department, completing the governor's tasks and demonstrating his excellence, the governor would surely remember him. Deville, the outstanding scion of the Rapp family. Deville. Popov interrupted Deville's thoughts. What do you think the governor is planning? He's moved so many resources from the logistics department, but we barely have enough to last through next month. And he's secretly repairing the statue of the emperor. Shut up! Deville snapped, his voice tense. Didn't the overseer already issue a gag order on that? If you let that slip and anyone outside the royal district finds out, you'll be finished. Popov clamped his hand over his mouth, his eyes darting nervously around. After seeing no one nearby, he let out a sigh of relief. I was just curious. Anyway, let's talk about something else. How do you think the governor plans to solve the food problem? With the royal district cut off from the lower hives and the outside world, I just can't figure out how he'll find new sources of food. Are you doubting the governor? No, I'm just asking. Popov waved his hands frantically, his face turning red with panic. I would never doubt the governor. Humph, your big mouth will get you killed one day. Deville's expression softened slightly. Luckily, you're only saying this in front of me. If the disciplinary officers overheard you, you'd be in serious trouble. I only talk like this to you, I keep my mouth shut around everyone else. Popov mimicked, zipping his lips. We're practically blood brothers. We're not that close. Deville gave him a sidelong glance. I haven't even thought about the issues you've raised. I'm just a small player. There's so much I don't know, and I'm in no position to question the governor, who stands at the pinnacle of Urth. He paused and recited a line from the Emperor's Book of Wisdom. Ignorance is a virtue. As executors of his will, all we need to do is follow the governor's lead. Popov lowered his head. You're right. With that, Deville stopped paying much attention to Popov, and soon, the two parted ways. When Deville returned home, his mother Marty informed him that, thanks to the governor's efforts, their food rations had been restored to normal levels. This was an unexpected joy. It meant their family could now survive on wood chip bread and wouldn't have to rely so much on corpse starch. Deville also shared the day's events with his mother and sister, telling them that he had gained the governor's favor and would soon take on new responsibilities. You are the pride of the Rapp family. Marty was filled with pride for her son, and Lilith was just as thrilled. The Rapp family embraced tightly, crying together, feeling as though the hard times were finally coming to an end. Afternoon. In the office atop the spire, Eden looked at a report in his hands, feeling a growing sense of unease. According to the report, several residential areas around the Holy Square had been attacked to varying degrees. Chapter 38, The Purge? The attacks on the residential areas were not simple affairs. The unfortunate victims left behind hardly any intact bodies. They were brutally dismembered, with their organs and brains missing. Judging by the evidence at the crime scenes, it appeared to be the work of some beast-like monsters. The residents of the district were now gripped by fear. People were terrified, and despair loomed even heavier over the territory. Eden let out a long sigh, turning to Beof, who was standing nearby. Have we found the culprits? No, those damned creatures are hiding well. Yousef shook his head, then continued, but we do have some leads. Several weeks ago, an agent we planted in the Hoffman family's territory sent us a report. The same thing happened there. I suspect this attack is related to the Broken Eye cult that's been spreading within their lands. Eden fell silent. 5 years ago, after the heretic rebellion, the Upper Hive sealed its connections to the outside world. Under Yousef's leadership, a grand purge was carried out to root out and eliminate the heretics. But as the royal district's control weakened, the Upper Hive fractured. It led to the rise of 3 dominant factions, the Royal District, the Hoffman family, and the Grey Wolf Gang. Within the Royal District, the policy towards cultists was one of zero tolerance. Any faith unrelated to the Emperor was banned. Any sign of disloyalty or blasphemy was met with judgment and immediate execution. But the Royal District had no authority beyond its borders. Soon, various heretical cults began to re-emerge in the territories of the Hoffman family and the Grey Wolf Gang. Gradually, those heretics began infiltrating the Royal District's lands. Fortunately, the Royal District had strict control, and the heretics could only spread in the outer areas. However, as the district's grip loosened further due to the ongoing resource crisis, instability grew. This gave the heretics a chance to infiltrate further. They mingled among the populace, making it nearly impossible to distinguish them. They carried out secret rituals, causing numerous deaths. Several law enforcement and logistics personnel had been killed while carrying out their duties. It was becoming a significant problem for the Royal District. What Eden couldn't have anticipated was that the heretics had infiltrated so close to the Holy Square. If they advanced any further, would they reach the Royal District, or even the Spire itself? What angered him most was the timing of the heretics' appearance. There were only a few days left until the Emperor Ascension Day. If the heretics launched an attack during the ceremony, it would lead to massive chaos. Fear and despair would grip everyone. At that point, all his efforts would be in vain. Eden had invested nearly all of the Royal District's resources into this Emperor Ascension Day. He couldn't afford such a failure. He even had reason to suspect that these heretics were brought in by the Holman family. Their goal could be to sabotage the ceremony. As for the Grey Wolf Gang, they weren't clever enough to orchestrate something of this magnitude. The Holman family, on the other hand, was skilled in scheming. They had launched attacks before. This time, they had struck at the heart of the Royal District. Eden turned to Yousef, resolute in his decision. We must cleanse all the heretics from the residential areas around the Holy Square before the ceremony. Yousef frowned. Governor, we don't have the time or manpower to investigate, identify, and eliminate the heretics. Think again, see if there's another way. Eden felt a headache coming on. No matter what, those heretics had to be dealt with. At such a crucial moment, nothing could go wrong. Yousef frowned deeply, then proposed a brutally simple solution. We could seal off the surrounding residential areas, declare them heretic nests, and carry out a full purge of everyone. It's the fastest, most efficient way that won't cause too much unrest. It was undoubtedly the quickest way to solve the problem, and it aligned with the Imperium's typical approach. It would just require some sacrifices. For the Imperium, sacrifices were nothing new. In fact, the Imperium's very foundation was built on sacrifice. Tens of thousands of lives? That was insignificant. Even on Earth, the loss of so many lives wouldn't cause much of a stir. After all, Earth had sacrificed close to 100 billion lives to pay the Imperium's tithes of 11. Governor, this is the best course of action the Royal District can take. Yousef spoke earnestly. If we allow the heretics to continue spreading, not only will the ceremony be ruined, but an even greater disaster will unfold. In other words, with Eden's approval, tens of thousands of lives would be sacrificed in the name of the Emperor. For most planetary governors, those bloated, parasitic leaders, this decision would be nothing. But for Eden, it was unacceptable. The education he had received could not allow him to make such a choice. Those were tens of thousands of lives, real, living people. But if they weren't swiftly dealt with, more lives would be lost, and all his plans would be for naught. At that moment, Eden truly understood how cheap life was in Warhammer 40k. When Yousef had mentioned before that millions or even billions had died on Earth to pay the imperial tithe, Eden hadn't really felt anything. It was just a story to him then. But now, faced with the decision to sacrifice tens of thousands of lives, the weight of it pressed down on him. Now he could understand a bit of the pain the previous Grant family leaders must have felt. This was truly a dilemma. Yousef, Thinking Eden was concerned about the potential fallout from a full-scale purge, confidently added, "Trust in my experience, Governor. I've handled many similar situations before. I promise you, the entire purge will be contained, with no impact on the surrounding districts. No one will escape, and no bad news will leak out. In 2 days, this matter will be completely resolved." Eden was speechless. Bayef wasn't wrong, he did have plenty of experience with purges. But why did he have to look so confident about it? He truly didn't seem to view people as human beings at all. For a moment, Eden thought that cruel rulers like this truly deserved their grim fates. They could commit the most horrific acts without a second thought. With a ruthless man like Bayef at his side, anyone who didn't know better might think Eden himself was the villain of the story. Eden couldn't shake the feeling that if Bayef ever fell to chaos, he'd be a significant figure. Bayef, with a posture of service and concern, asked, "Governor, what do you think?" What did he think? Was he really supposed to agree to a plan that would wipe out tens of thousands of innocent people? Even taking a step back, these people couldn't be allowed to die. They were his resource, his precious fuel. Eden wanted to explode with frustration, to tell Bayef to get out, but he restrained himself. After all, Bayef was just an executor, a loyal administrator. No matter how cruel his actions, the ultimate responsibility would fall on him, the planetary governor. Or rather, on Eden Grant. Eden had only been in this world for a short time, there was no way he was taking the blame for this. On the contrary, he was here to clean up the mess left behind by the original Grant and bring order to this chaotic situation. The question remained. If he rejected Bayef's proposal, was there another solution? Chapter 39, The Experiment, A Great Creation. Leave me. Let me think this through. Eden closed his eyes, struggling with the weight of the decision. Yes, Governor. Bayef bowed slightly and exited the room. Eden walked out onto the Spire's balcony. The setting sun cast its golden light over him, outlining his figure with a warm glow. Below him, millions of citizens bustled about, people who owed their allegiance to the governor. The crushing responsibility weighed heavily on him, making him feel exhausted. Gazing out at the horizon, Eden murmured to himself. "I'll find a better way. I have to." Evening. Hoffman family territory. Screech. The sharp sound of metal scraping to a halt echoed as a makeshift lift descended to the lowest level. Polished black boots stepped off the lift, and Yousef Hoffman emerged, exuding the grace of a gentleman. He was the current head of the Hoffman family and ruler of this territory. Before him was a vast, enclosed laboratory. The lighting was dim, casting a crimson hue over the dried bloodstains and scattered chunks of flesh on the floor. Yousef wrinkled his nose and instinctively sidestepped the filth on the ground. How could these lowlifes not keep the place clean? Lord Hoffman. A researcher clad in a crimson lab coat, with disheveled hair, hurried over to greet him. "How is the experiment progressing?" Yousef inquired, taking a cautious step back. The researcher eagerly flipped through his notes. "Based on the data we collected last time, our research has made significant progress. We'll soon be able to create a new batch of completed specimens." Yousef nodded in satisfaction. A few days ago, he had sent a batch of test subjects toward the Royal District for field trials. The data obtained from those trials was precisely what he needed. His gaze shifted to the massive cultivation area, where rows of towering cylindrical glass vats contained terrifyingly grotesque creations suspended in liquid. These monstrosities were weapons Hoffman had developed to deal with the Imperial Guards. With that thought in mind, Yousef walked past the vats and arrived at the far end of the cultivation zone. Here stood a vat far larger than the others, around 10 meters tall, with a broken eye symbol emblazoned on its glass. Yousef stared at the vat with fervent admiration. This was the true masterpiece. This was the foundation of his plan to seize control of the planet. Through the glass, one could see a grotesque, flesh-like mass. Upon closer inspection, it became apparent that this was an abomination resembling a pregnant woman. Her skin had been peeled away, her flesh intertwined in a horrifying mess. Her abdomen had ballooned to an obscene size, resembling a monstrous mass covered in countless eyes. Despite the bloated horror that was her belly, the woman's upper body and legs remained relatively normal in size. Yet, she was still alive, silently screaming in agony within the liquid. When her gaze fell upon those standing outside the vat, particularly Yousef, her eyes pleaded desperately for release. She longed for death, hoping for the end of her unbearable torment. Yousef's eyes watered as he looked at her. She was his sister, his blood relative. Avoiding her pleading gaze, he nodded to the researcher. The researcher moved to a control panel and pressed a green button. Instantly, the lab hummed to life, and the dark red lights flickered. Machinery at the base of the massive vat began pumping a variety of liquids into the woman's body through intricate tubes. The process caused the woman unspeakable pain. Her silent screams seemed to form a tangible force within the liquid. Her grotesque, eye-covered abdomen, several meters in diameter, began pulsing like a giant heart. Yousef watched the horrific sight with maniacal tears streaming down his face. Life was being created there. Only through the most extreme suffering and despair could such a great creation come to life. A mechanical arm inserted a syringe into the flesh mass, extracting a small amount of liquid from within. The syringe then deposited the liquid into a sealed test tube. The mysterious liquid inside the tube emitted a mesmerizing blue glow. Yousef observed the liquid from a distance, his posture cautious. These substances would be his gift to Eden Grant, that fool in the royal district. "You, test its effects." Yousef ordered a young researcher to experiment with the liquid inside the test tube. The young researcher trembled with fear but obeyed nonetheless. Defying orders in this place was a fate worse than death. Many had already proven that. The researcher shakily entered the sealed glass chamber. The moment he stepped inside, the chamber locked behind him. He turned toward Yousef and the others, as if wanting to say something, but seeing the Lord's expression, he remained silent. The young researcher, trembling, drew the glowing blue liquid from the test tube into a syringe and injected it into a rat inside a glass box. Upon receiving the injection, the rat began violently convulsing, its body grotesquely mutating. It grew to the size of a small dog, sprouting several pitch-black eyes. Its teeth and claws elongated into sharp, deadly weapons. The mutated rat thrashed about violently, slamming against the sides of the glass box, which began to crack under the force. Seeing this, the young researcher was overwhelmed with terror. He rushed to the glass door of the chamber, banging on it, pleading to be let out. But no one outside paid him any attention. Yousef and the others merely watched. Realizing there was no escape, the young researcher turned around, leaning against the glass wall, and faced the monstrous rat. The cracks in the glass box grew wider, it wouldn't hold much longer. If that cursed rat broke free, it would tear him apart. He was drowning in helplessness. Thud thud thud. The glass wall behind him shook slightly. The young researcher turned around and saw Lord Yousef standing on the other side of the glass, watching him. Yousef, maintaining his gentlemanly smile, raised a hand and pointed to the other side of the chamber, gesturing for the researcher to look there. Following his direction, the researcher spotted an Imperial-issue rapid-fire autogun mounted on the wall. Realizing the situation, the researcher sprinted over, grabbing the gun. It became clear, this experiment had two test subjects, the rat and himself. If he didn't kill that abomination, he was dead for sure. Taking a deep breath, he cocked the gun and aimed it at the glass box. Hiss! With a screech, the monstrous rat shattered the glass box. Ta-da-ta-da-da! Before it could fully emerge, the rat was engulfed in a hail of bullets from the rapid-fire autogun. The mutated rat struggled, trying to escape, but the barrage of bullets forced it back, blood spraying from its wounds. The relentless fire pushed it into a corner, where its body exploded into chunks of gore. The young researcher kept firing until the gun clicked empty. He looked at the mangled, motionless body of the rat, finally feeling a bit of relief. But then, without warning, the mutated rat sprang back to life, leaping onto him and tearing into his flesh. Ah! The young researcher screamed in agony, utterly powerless as the beast ripped him apart. "Mommy!" Those were his last words before he died. Yousef, standing outside the glass wall, watched the scene unfold with satisfaction. The experiment was a success. Inside the chamber, the mutated rat devoured the researcher's body, leaving nothing but bones behind. Yet it remained ravenous, still craving flesh. The abomination turned its gaze to Yousef, flinging itself at the glass wall in a frenzy. Thud! It smashed into the glass and was thrown back. But it immediately got up and lunged again, only to be repelled once more. Outside the chamber, Yousef calmly watched the creature, which seemed tireless, repeatedly ramming into the glass until it was covered in its own blood. Just as he was about to leave, something caught his attention. A small crack had appeared in the glass. The mutated rat slammed into the glass again. Crack! The entire glass wall splintered. End of chapter. Check out my Patreon for plus 20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com/Zalum. Plus 500 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. Chapter 40, Yousef's Gift. As the glass wall began to crack, the researchers around Yousef were filled with fear and instinctively stepped back. However, Yousef stood calmly, watching the mutated rat with interest. The creature shook its head and let out a furious screech before launching itself once more at the already fragile glass wall. Crash! The mutated rat smashed through the glass, carrying shards with it like deadly projectiles, flying straight toward Yousef at high speed. Buzz! The rat and shards seemed to collide with an invisible wall, bouncing back even faster than before, slamming violently into the opposite glass wall. The creature lay on the ground, almost completely immobilized. It had hit Yousef's personal miniature force field. As a noble lord, Yousef always carried a miniature force field generator with him. He lowered his mechanized arm, which had been raised in defense, and the humming of the force field dissipated. That mechanical arm was, in fact, a miniature force field converter, always protecting him. This device was a crude imitation of the Empire's powerful force field generator known as the Rosary Beads, but it worked well enough. Hiss! The mutated rat screeched once again as it struggled back to its feet. Its tenacity excited Yousef even more. What a terrifying weapon! The mutated creature lunged once again, but this time it seemed to be held back by some unseen force. It struggled violently, but its movements soon slowed, and it collapsed, unmoving. You've arrived, Yousef said calmly, turning toward the figure in a black robe who had just entered the room. The figure's forehead bore a blue symbol of the Broken Eye cult, and his face was marred with scars. His eyes glowed faintly with blue light. It was he who had subdued the mutated rat. The blue light in the robed figure's eyes faded, and he knelt before Yousef. My lord, your devoted servant greets you. Yousef was plotting a grand scheme, and this black-robed man was a key part of that plan. For years, Yousef had been preparing for the day when his ambitions would come to fruition. I am born to rule. As the 14th son of the Hoffman family, born out of wedlock, Yousef possessed knowledge and wisdom beyond ordinary men. He was a master strategist, driven by boundless ambition. He had navigated the treacherous politics of the noble houses, orchestrating countless schemes and conspiracies to defeat his elder brothers and become the sole heir of the family. His father had high hopes for him, believing Yousef could lead the family to new heights, fulfilling the centuries-old dream of the Hoffman family. To that end, his father poured all the family's resources into his training, grooming Yousef for greatness. But everyone underestimated Yousef's ambition. One night, Yousef personally drove a poisoned dagger into his father's heart. Only then did his father realize how impatient and ambitious his heir truly was. Take that seat! His father gasped, his eyes wide, gripping Yousef's hand with his final breath. With tears streaming down his face, Yousef agreed to his father's dying wish. And so, Yousef became the head of the Hoffman family. What followed was a brutal purge of dissenters and the placement of loyal followers in key positions, securing his control over the family. With this newfound power, Yousef could finally pursue his true goal, the centuries-old dream of his family, revenge against the Grant family and the ascension to the position of planetary governor. The Hoffman family had long coveted that seat. It was rightfully theirs. The Hoffman family had taken root on Earth long ago, growing into a powerful noble house. However, at that time, they were still subservient to the ruling Red Eye King of the Gonger dynasty. The Hoffman served the Red Eye King loyally, paying their exorbitant taxes on time. But no one wants to be a servant forever. In secret, they amassed power, waiting for their chance to rule. That chance came over 3,000 years ago, when the Empire arrived. The Red Eye King, mad with power, refused the Empire's offer of peaceful submission, killing the Empire's envoy and even firing upon their ships. Within a day, the Empire's mighty fleet surrounded Earth, drop pods raining down like meteors. From the pods emerged warriors clad in crimson power armor, space marines. They obliterated the Red Eye King for his defiance, reducing him to ashes, and hunted down every last trace of his bloodline. Seizing the opportunity, the Hoffman family pledged loyalty to the Empire, emptying their stores to supply the Imperial fleet. They hosted grand feasts to honor the Empire's officials, swearing fealty to the Emperor and agreeing to pay the 11 tax. Impressed by their loyalty, the Empire's officials promised to grant them the position of planetary governor. The Hoffman family was overjoyed. After centuries of plotting, they were finally about to achieve their dream. But just as they were preparing to celebrate and plan the coronation ceremony, disaster struck. The Grant family outsiders from another planet bribed the Empire's officials and stole the position of planetary governor. Thieving scum! The Hoffman family's patriarch, upon hearing the news, was so enraged that he vomited blood and died on the spot. Soon after, the Grant family moved in, taking control of Urth as the new planetary governors. Furious, the Hoffman family rallied other noble houses, raised private armies, and incited the populace to rebel. But the Grant family was too powerful, crushing the rebellion in a bloody crackdown. Seeing that the situation was hopeless, the Hoffman family did what they always did best. They became the first to surrender. After executing a few scapegoats, the new Hoffman patriarch knelt at the gates of the Grant family's palace, begging for mercy and swearing eternal loyalty to the Grants. And so, the Hoffman family was forgiven, once again becoming vassals, serving their new rulers. 3,000 years passed. The world had changed, and most people had forgotten that bitter history. But the children of the Hoffman family had not forgotten. Their family creed commanded them to remember the shame of the past. Whenever Yousef recalled these events, he burned with rage and humiliation. That was why, after securing control of his family, he had begun planning for revenge. He was even willing to use forbidden powers. Though recent years had brought chaos, the brutal 11 attacks, warp storms, hive undercity mutations, and the heretic rebellion, Yousef had never forgotten his desire for vengeance. He seized the opportunity when the Grant family was at its weakest, striking a blow that nearly destroyed them. For the first time in thousands of years, the Holman family was free. Yousef had held off the Grant family's retaliation, taking control of a third of the upper hive. He believed that, with his intelligence and cunning, he would be the one to end his family's centuries of shame. He would destroy the Grant family and take the title of planetary governor. Once he held that power, he would reclaim the lost hive cities and restore Urth to its rightful path. Now, all he had to do was follow the timeline and advance his plan step by step. Yousef looked down at the kneeling black-robed man. "Have you delivered the gift to Eden Grant yet?"
Thanks for listening.